Thank you very much. Are we ready, Commissioners? Let me first welcome everybody to our regular scheduled meeting Tuesday, February 21, 2023 at the Veterans Memorial Building of the City Planning Commission of Morro Bay. Very nice to have you all here and nice to have those in person. Thank you for braving the wind. We really do appreciate it. And let me introduce everybody up here. We have a quorum, and I'd like to start with this end. Can I say hi to Commissioner Ingrafia, Commissioner King, Commissioner Rodriguez, and Commissioner Meyer. We are all volunteers, and this is our favorite way to spend Tuesday evenings. Let's see. Let me do a moment of silence before we begin. And Glenn, you were going to have something quick to say?
Thank you, Chairman Roshan. My name is Glenn Silloway. I'm the president of the Historical Society of Morro Bay, and I know this is unusual, but I wanted to speak very briefly in memory of Linda Estes, who passed away yesterday. She was our former president of the society, and I'll never forget the first time I ever met her, sitting down at my very first board meeting, and when Roger passed my new business cards across the table, it said, Glenn Silloway, Vice President. Well, you know what that means. She snookered me. And I looked at Linda, and she had a twinkle in her eye and a little bit of a wink, and here I am 7 years later, still doing this job. She was a really kind person who made people around her happy and better. So we're going to miss her. And I'd like to share a moment of silence with you thinking about her if you knew her.
Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next order of business is Planning Commissioner announcements, and I'd like to let everybody know that the Planning Commission spent 6 hours on Friday at a training for planning commissioners, and I want to thank Joe and Asia for making that. And I think it was an interesting experience. It focused on quite a few different things: planning role, framework, community engagement, but also housing laws and policy. It gave us an update, and I thought it was super helpful and informative. Joe, do you have anything to add?
Just to confirm, I thought it was very useful. Gave me some new insights that I wasn't really aware of, and just all around a good idea.
Nice. Asia?
Yeah, it was a really useful time, and I think that for me, the discussion on housing was especially pertinent in thinking about our own housing element in our city, and hoping that we can dive into that more and maybe even get more training into the future with that.
So Scott, we were thinking the opportunity of maybe training around housing. One of the folks was a housing specialist from the state. The other thing that came up quite a bit was coastal commission issues. And I think it could be helpful for us as a commission to get familiar with that. I don't know if it's a training or just an introduction, but I wanted to see what you thought about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to, place an item on the agenda, where we could talk about what our relationship is like with the Coastal Commission, how we interact with them, when we interact with them, what are those interactions like. What staff are we talking to? Those types of things. So you get a better feel for it. And then depending on what comes out of that, there's probably even the possibility, for us to have them, maybe attend virtually, like via Zoom or something, if there was something that came up that you had specific interest in, that I could have them come speak to, so.
Great. If you could put that in the record, and then we'll talk about it
Okay.
and organize something.
And Commissioner Roshan, just for the record, I just wanted to
Please.
say that I was planning to attend that, but I ended up participating in planning a 50-year anniversary the day before that was supposed to happen, so couldn't make it. So I did want to go, but I'm sorry I didn't.
Thank you, Mike. And Eric was planning to go, but was legitimately sick. He gave me a doctor's note, so. Let's go to, other comments from commissioners. Does anybody have anything they want to add? Let's go to public comment. So one of the nice things that we do on this commission is offer the chance to speak to any issue that's not on the agenda, or if you want to speak to an agenda issue so you can leave us, that's fine too. Any public comment in the queue? Nate,
No.
Anthony?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Thank you. Anybody in the room? Betty, what a surprise.
Betty Winholtz. Three things real briefly, too briefly and one a little bit longer. I want to say that I've observed that there's been some painting and striping on Harbor Street, and I just want a clarification, is the paving all done then, and there's not going to be a black overlay? And so things are starting to, or are those so faded that they needed to bring them back and before they do the overall painting? That was one. The second one was, I understand that the tours and at the sewer plant are happening, I believe it's on Thursday, and that there's going to be a pre-tour party for a lot of city officials. And as someone who pays an almost $200 sewer and water bill, I'm offended that as the person who's paying for your food is not invited. I wrote a letter to the editor to the Trib, and I compared that to what Cayucas did, which was a wide open meeting, and everybody was invited at the same time, and here you're distinguishing between officials and the people who are paying the bills. And I just want that on the record, that I think that's rude. At the least. And then I want to get to the pictures that I gave to Mr. Graham to put up. It occurred to me this project is not done, but it's getting there, and it's so in my face that I want to bring it to your attention, because the former Planning Commission passed it, and I think that it's really a plan that should never happen again. So that's why I want to tell you about it. This is the low-income housing project out at Tascadero Road, or 41 in Maine. And I want you to notice how narrow those spaces are with the red beam. Scott, if you'd change that, another picture, please. And that this is the big project. It was only supposed to be 28 feet high. I can't believe that it's not at least 30 or 33, it's really, really tall. And so I'm concerned about that they violated the height limit. And the next picture. I want you to notice that there were supposed to be one two-story building and two three-story buildings, but I believe there's three three-story buildings now, and that's a major shift. This is the entrance from Sunset. I want you to notice how narrow that is, because there's no way a fire truck or any emergency person can get, you'd have to walk through there to a three-story building if there's an emergency. So this was not well planned in terms of emergency rescue for heart attack or fire or whatever. No one can enter this plaza that's in the middle of the buildings with a vehicle. So I consider that kind of dangerous. Next, please. And so here you can see that this is actually, there's a floor below it. This is the second floor, and people will be, I'm sure this will be landscaped to some extent, but again, my concern is safety. Where they're going to have to crawl through windows to escape the building if something major happened, like an earthquake or a fire. This is what it looks like from Rockview, the street behind it, and you can see that it's 3 stories. Some of it looks underground, but it's just a large hill. Next, please. Again, this is an entrance from the east. The other was the entrance from the west, and you can see it's no better. It's still only wide enough for humans and no vehicles to walk by. And the other part of that is the sun happens to be coming in right now. It was at the height of the day, but otherwise the plaza inside is going to be dark. This particular building will never see sun because it's on the north side and the sun won't last that long. Are we almost done with the pictures maybe? Okay, they weren't in any particular order. And so this is the staircases. People are going to have to carry their furniture up 3 of these flights of stairs, or their laundry down 3 flights of stairs, or an emergency ambulance person will have to carry a person down these flights of stairs. So I would encourage you to go look at this project as it gets closer to being finished and notice where the errors were made and never do this again. Thanks.
Betty, thank you so much.
Hi, Terry Simons, Morro Bay, and I so rarely get a chance to agree with Betty on issues, but I can't say strongly enough how much I agree with her tonight. As a person who pays 2 $200 water bills a month, I think I should have gotten a personal invitation, but I didn't, and that's okay with me because I understand that we're trying to operate on a limited budget. I thank her particularly for the photographs that she prompted to come tonight because they speak specifically to an ongoing issue of mine, and that's early public review of projects. I don't know what sort of public review other than possibly the Planning Commission. And the details that Betty is pointing out here are absolutely essentially reviewed as a development review commission type of review rather than a planning commission which has a grander oversight of continuity with this community. But a design review committee would look at these buildings just exactly the way Betty has looked at them and said, hey, is there handicap access here? What are we doing with a 4-story building with stairways without an elevator? These kinds of issues should have come to the public attention early on in the process, not when the building's photographically ready to be complete. So more on that later. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Terry. Scott, do you have can you make any response to the questions on that building?
The building is compliant, with all the development standards that it was approved with. We do height certs both at foundation and at the high point of the roof, so we have certifications for those, so it's meeting the height requirement. It just looks taller because of the topography of the site. It slopes down towards Atascadero Road, Highway 41. And so you get additional height with the way that we measure height in our zoning code, which is through average natural grade, which is average natural grade underneath the building footprint for each building.
Okay, thank you, Scott.
Sure.
And, Joe, please.
No, it happened that I was on the Planning Commission at that time, and I do recall with respect to the elevators that there was a strong suggestion on the part of the applicant that they were looking at other properties and that they had strict budget constraints, and as much as they wanted to, they didn't feel they could, and we let it go at that.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. And Terry, thanks for agreeing with Betty. That's really nice. Let's see. I think at this point, we can go to, we got to do the consent calendar. Eric, you have to recuse yourself. We have commissioners' minutes from December 20th, January 3rd, and the typical current and advanced planning processing list. Any discussion? Do I have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second?
I'll second that.
Do we need a vote, or can we just say aye?
Aye's fine.
Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? None. One abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. New business. So we get to do something fun tonight. We are so lucky to have guests here with us, and the focus is this commission has spent considerable energy looking at the history of Morro Bay and what does that mean? What is our historic narrative? What does our historic map look like? And this will be our first attempt to sort of bring that to a public hearing. What we're hoping to do is not focus on regulation. What we're hoping to do is focus on the story and to see what that means to all of us, what it means to the community, to give the community a chance to speak. And our initial guests are, I think, fun and exciting. So we're so happy to welcome them. I'm going to introduce Roger Castle, literally one of the men who wrote the book. And he's on Zoom. So if we could, Nate and Anthony, can we, do we have Roger as a participant, as a panelist?
Yes, he is in on panelist, and if he is ready to unmute himself and speak, he may go ahead.
Great. And then Joe Dunlop, he wrote another book. And I don't see him on the list. Could he be citizen? Joe's on the...
I'm not seeing anybody under that name, but person under the name citizen, if you could raise your hand if you happen to be Joe Dunlop.
I spoke to him a moment ago, and he said that
He was on?
connected, yes.
It's, Anthony, is it citizen?
Watching the proceedings.
I'm not getting any response from the one under citizen.
Huh. Do you want to try calling him again?
Message? Joe, you can send him a message. Send him a message to say.
Anyhow, we're hoping to get Joe Dunlop to join us. He wrote When Morro Bay Went to War. Our third panelist is Dorothy Cutter, a local neighbor, and she's here with us tonight, sitting right over there, an artist, both a painter, photographer, and someone who knows the Morro Bay cultural scene really well. Our fourth is Bill Martoni, and his wife Bernadette, I think, was going to come, but maybe didn't. But we thank her for trying, and Bill is another long-term Central Coast person, and I think really does have a sense of what the place means, both culturally and historically. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to get 10 minutes from Eric to give us a kind of a frame for how we're going to conduct these hearings and information sessions. And what we're doing, again, this is going to be casual, it's going to be comfortable. I'm excited just to get to visit with these folks, and maybe we begin to understand a little bit more about Morro Bay and what it means and what our historic map might look like. I'm real excited about that, and we want to make sure that the community gets a chance to speak as well. So we're going to go around and ask questions of the panelists, and we want to invite whoever's here or on the Zoom to also, if you have a question for anybody, please ask, and we'd love to hear from you. We've got about an hour to do this, and I guess if we could, Eric, are you ready?
So I was born here, and that gave me somewhat of a look at what Morro Bay is. But I still didn't understand what exactly Morro Bay is. It's been taking an ongoing lifespan to kind of figure out what it is. Primarily, I would say Morro Bay is a town of people who are not fancy. They're humble for the most part. Moms here bought denim stick-on patches from Cornet or Sprouse Reach to fix the holes in the kids' jeans. And those jeans weren't Levi's, those jeans were usually from Sears. I think they were called Tough Skins. It's a town that the people made their own way for the most part. They often had silly names, maybe like Reg or Tiger or son of a bitch, something or other. But they didn't live large. They moved here because they saw or wanted opportunities. Families built small local empires and didn't sell out to corporations. Businesses were built around tourism, fishing, construction, service industries, consumer staples, and real estate for the most part. When I was a kid, kids made diagonal paths through the empty lots and backyards of the houses to get to school quicker or come home faster or get to the market to get candy. Dogs ran free with no leash laws. When you went to the grocery store, there was one of those little spiral-bound notepads with little lines on it, and each family in my neighborhood had a little spiral-bound notepad at the market, and that was how, at the end of the month, you got your bill from the grocery. They said, hey, you owe us, $45 or something. It was a very much more of a casual town. You didn't have to bring ID for your check because the lady at Safeway knew you. The town is entirely a town of small lots. There's no mansions. I mean, there was the Fairbanks mansion, but it's gone now. That was the only real mansion in town, and it wasn't even a mansion. It was just a big house. The big Victorian people, they moved to Slough or Santa Barbara. So the town was pretty humble, all in all. That's my primary base. And from there, when you look at the 50,000-foot view of Morro Bay, people think of it as a fishing village. Wikipedia says this, basically. I'm surmising. Indians, Spanish explorers, Mexican land grants, Riley, the Navy, fishing, power plant, and Jack LaLanne. And that's their description of Morro Bay in so many words. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think it's a slightly more nuanced description. But history's kind of one of those rabbit holes. And the more you go down it, the more you understand about the stories from the local places and people, and so the more intertwined they become, and the more history becomes just sort of like the synapses in your brain. It fires bigger and bigger and bigger. And the people who are speaking tonight, I've learned a lot from, and I would like to describe a few of the things that I've learned, and they're quirky in some ways. This first image that's sitting there in front of you is somewhat confusing, but what that represents is what I'll call, I wrote these things down. This is Mexican land grant in daily life. You always wonder why do we talk about Mexican land grants? Well, if you look at Morro Bay, you'll remember there's a triangular park downtown. And you may know, if you went to elementary school here, that there's a diagonal line on the ball field run with eucalyptus trees, and that's on that same diagonal line. And that same diagonal line goes all the way down just in front of where we're speaking, to the point just not 300 feet that way, and goes all the way back, I've circled it in blue here, to across South Bay Boulevard. And that's the edge of the Rancho San Bernardo, which is somewhat interesting to me. When I was a kid, I had no idea why suddenly the lots all change in town, like 30 degrees. I didn't understand what it was until I was about 55, born here. Next slide. So this house also confused me over my life because it seemed different than all the rest of the houses in this neighborhood. This is on King Street. And I only recently figured it out because I heard it from some people on Facebook that this was originally part of what's known as the Cabrillo Country Club Estates. This was their sales office. This was their headquarters, so to speak. And what Cabrillo Country Club Estates was the sale of the lots in the Heights and the development of the golf course to the south of town. And if you flip to the next slide, in the upper right-hand corner of the community there, this is a 1930 aerial. There's a little round black circle. That round black circle represents this house. And if you're coming from San Luis Obispo, you can sort of see why that location was specifically interesting to these people. The Kings, which is the street it's on, goes up the hill, and at that time, Kings went right over to the golf course and down the hill. It doesn't do that anymore. But it was a direct link, so they could bring a tourist from somewhere and show them what they were doing. And the Depression happened right after this little development happened, and so subsequently they were just about to go bankrupt, and there were smart folks that decided they should lobby the state, and the state decided to end up buying this property. And we just by accident somewhat got the state park down there. And the state park comes with all sorts of funny other things, the museum, the White's Point and Black Mountain, brilliantly named White's Point and Black Mountain. I don't understand. Morro Bay has a series of brilliantly named places. Unnamed Creek is one of them, one of my favorites. So this slide here also shows the size of the community in 1930. I don't know if you can actually grasp it, but there's no waterfront yet. There's no Embarcadero. And indeed, in the lower right-hand corner is the other estuary, which used to be called the Willows. And that estuary was filled in by the Navy later, and we're going to get to that in a second. So this period in the 1930s is when tourism became a thing in Morro Bay, and it kind of started with the sales of these lots in this Cabrillo Country Club estates. But the tourism, really, those people that were being sold to were from the Valley or from Los Angeles or from North San Francisco, primarily from the Valley, as evidenced by the names of the streets in the neighborhood up there. And Morro Bay has had this connection to the Valley for most of its life, since the 30s anyway, if not a little bit prior. The Valley, though far away, is 2 hours as a transit. If your kid, it's hot, you're in August, and your kids are mad at you, and you're in Visalia, and you want to do something, so in 2 hours you can be in Morro Bay. And you can get a motel, you can go to the beach, you can have fish and chips, you can go to the movie tonight, you can wake up in the morning, have pancakes, have lunch, and go back to Visalia in 2.5 hours, 2 hours. The next slide is paintings. Oh, for a second, the other thing that happened is the Roosevelt Highway, Highway 1 and Highway 41 happened in the 30s. And those two became conduits for tourists coming into town. This is a painting of the old waterfront by William Went, and it's the 1920s. And in the 20s, there was a small art community that started, and that community predates a lot of the fishing that happened here. Fishing was abalone and so forth at this time, but the art community was tiny and the fishing community was tiny in the 20s. I would say they were roughly the same size. But there's a lot of little Morro Bay that was in this art colony that's not very well known. The next slide is the waterfront and the Navy site. And this is the biggest thing that ever happened in Morro Bay. And Joe's going to get into this later, but this absolutely was huge. Dredged the harbor. The power plant was built there later. It's a monster. Next slide. This is the old fisherman before the harbor. This is a little tiny fishing boat negotiating the waves at the rock before the rock was connected. This shows the dangers associated with fishing in those days and the bravery of the men in the pre-Embarcadero era. Next slide. This is the original power plant being built. This is the second stack, actually, is already up, so it's a little bit in there. I don't know what year this slide is from. It looks to be late 50s, possibly. I can't quite tell. But after the waterfront happened, we had all this fishing that happened. And the fishing wasn't, when you think about fishing, it's sport fishing, which is like you come from the valley and you want to go out in the boat and catch fish. You have abalone divers. You have the trawlers. That's the majority of what people think about fishing. And you also have the oyster farms out in the bay. And there's a great variety of Morro Bay's history in those four little categories. But it's not just fishing. You have to differentiate it. I'm going to leave it at that, but I have just one last little comment. A preservation committee provides us as a community the ability to weave a much more nuanced tapestry of the places, people, and events that created the cultural heritage of what is Morro Bay now. And knowing this history allows us as a community to better understand how to move forward as planners. And I really like to thank the speakers for coming tonight.
Eric, thank you. That was great. So now we get to, I'd like to go around with the four speakers and ask you to give us each about a minute or so, 2 minutes, to introduce yourself, kind of place yourself in Morro Bay history for everyone. And then we're going to go to more of a panel discussion, but I'd love to start with that. Roger and Joe, can you hear me? Can we hear you guys? Nate, Anthony?
Thank you, Chair. We are trying to get Citizen to talk, so he should be live now.
Hello, this is Roger.
Roger, welcome.
Welcome.
Yeah, can you give us 2 minutes? Tell us about yourself, your connection with Morro Bay, and kind of give us an idea how you might fit in tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I am excuse me. I was born in the area and raised in Morro Bay. My father came to Morro Bay in 1927. And so I am certainly part of the history that's around here. I can certainly relate to what Eric has told us about the things you can find around our history. To me, history is about memory. And it's about advising, helping people understand what it is they're looking at when they come to our town in terms of its age. Anything we would do along the lines of preserving history and making it an article in our list of things should be aimed at trying to preserve what is visible now of the history that exists. And I don't think much more about that.
Roger, thank you so much. Can we go to Joe? Joe, can we?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can. Can we get Joe up on the screen? Anthony? Nate? There you are. Hi, Joe.
Looks like I'm there now.
Yes.
Hi. Yeah, my name is Joe Dunlap, and first of all, I'd like to say I'm very pleased and flattered that I was included in this discussion. My history with Morro Bay goes back to 1953 when my parents moved to Morro Bay so my dad could work on the power plant that was just being started at that time. I lived in Morro Bay from 1953 to 1973, and that's really the last time I was there. So it's been 50 years since I actually lived in town. I've always had a very strong tie to Morro Bay, and as you probably know, I've written a book about the history of the U.S. Navy's involvement in building the Embarcadero and in the Navy base and whatnot. And I spent about 4 or 5 years researching that book, and there's still so much more to be uncovered about that whole period. But anyway, that's basically my involvement at this point. Is there anything else you would like to hear about?
Well, no. Well, that was a great start, and then we're going to come back with questions if that works for you. And thank you, Roger, Joe, for joining us.
Certainly.
Dorothy, would you give us 2 minutes and introduce yourself and kind of place yourself in Morro Bay history for us?
Okay. Well, my husband and I moved here in 1957 and bought the house. I live in the same house we bought in 1957, so I've been here a long time. I was here when the city was incorporated and before, and I can tell you a little something about my involvement in the city at that time, and there's some interesting stories. Is it okay if I tell a few stories?
Sure.
Okay. Anyhow, there were, at the time, when they were discussing the possibility of incorporation, there were 4 couples, of which my husband and I were one, and we became sort of the first political group because we were very activist against incorporation, and we made placards and we would march up and down Morro Bay Boulevard, which wasn't called that at the time. And so people knew that we were there. So when the city did become incorporated, then we had all the people who were voting who wanted to be either the mayor or council. And so as the first political group, the only campaigning they did was in people's houses. So, of course, we had them over, and they wanted to know, well, what was it that we would like them to do? Well, actually, just before the city became a city, we used to have palm trees up and down Morro Bay Boulevard, and the county cut them all down. And we were very upset about that, and so we decided that what our project was to get street trees in Morro Bay. So I think a lot of people would like to know how we ended up with the trees, the street trees that we have. So because we marched around with placards calling for street trees, that became the big issue. And all the people who were running for council, nobody else seemed to have an issue, so suddenly they got very interested in our issue. And the first thing they did was plant street trees. And we were the group that they went to and said, well, what should we plant? Well, the mother of one of the men in our group was the president of the garden club, and so we knew nothing really about street trees. So we went and we asked her, well, what kind of trees should we tell them to plant? And she said, oh, flowering eucalyptus would be beautiful. So we went back and told them we wanted flowering eucalyptus, and that's what you got. So that's the story of how we ended up with flowering eucalyptus, which a lot of people like and a lot of people hate. So.
And that was Dorothy Desjardins, right?
Huh?
Dorothy Desjardins?
Dorothy Desjardins, yeah, she was the president of the garden club. She's gone now. Yeah.
Well, and today we're still, identified as a tree city.
Yes.
Nationally, yeah. Dorothy, thank you. Bill, can you give us a couple of minutes and tell us how you fit in and your history on the coast here?
Yeah. Bill Martini. I'm probably the newcomer around here. I drifted into town around 52 years ago. I had gotten out of Vietnam after being over there and coming back from Germany, and came up in this area on the GI Bill. I went to Cuesta College. They were giving me $137 a month to go to school and live. So Dorothy is my neighbor, and I probably know bits and pieces. Lived in Morro Bay for quite a while. My wife's Bernadette Pacaric. Actually came into this area back in the mid-50s, so she's really knows a lot of the history. As far as tonight, she couldn't make it. She has some back issues, but she'd love to be here next time. And as far as the bits and pieces of history, I know we'll get into that, but that's just my general background.
Love it. Thank you, Bill. Say hi to Dorothy for us. Scott, did you have something to add?
No, I don't have anything to add.
Are we doing okay?
Yeah, this is good.
Oh, good.
This is fantastic. I like fun stuff.
Well, I'm still thrilled. Eric, do you want to ask a...
Chair Roshan, can I ask a question?
Yeah, Michael.
Since all of the panelists have spoken, this is something I've always said as a planning commissioner for 10 years now on multiple commissions. Would you agree that the longer it takes us to preserve our history, the less we have to preserve? True or false? Is that a true or false statement? I've always pushed that concept. The longer it takes us, all of you.
Oh, well, it's going.
Yes. So I'm just.
So you're asking, let's...
And it's a shame.
Let's start with Dorothy. What do you think, Dorothy?
Well, I've lived here for a long time, and most of my adult life, and I really love Morro Bay, and I hated to see certain things happen. But on the other hand, considering this coastal California, it's still a pretty small town, and we can still save a lot of it. And so I think it's really important to think about every time we get a really high building and it blocks people's views. Things like that. We have some lovely old houses here. It is a beach community, so it's not, and the waterfront is tending to get to be like trinket shops. You have the same stuff in the same shops as they have in Avila and Santa Barbara and every coastal town up and down the coast. And so we're losing a lot of our uniqueness on our Embarcadero. So those are things to think about, you know.
Nice.
What is it you'd like to have? You know, we used to have really a lovely fishing community. I mean, we had sort of rundown places that had stories. I don't know. It's
Nice.
there's a lot of stories about a lot of the buildings that we don't have anymore. But
Well, thank you, Dorothy. Well, I'm going to transition into the Embarcadero, and we have Roger and Joe. Joe, I was going to ask you, the period that you wrote about, the breakwater, the harbor, the Embarcadero, the site where the power plant was the base. Can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, these are some of the most defining features in Morro Bay still today, and they were built in the World War II period. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Anthony, do we still have Joe there?
Yes, he is still here.
Can you put him on the screen for us? Thanks.
Unmute. There, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, as far as the history of the formation of the bay as we know it now, it's really, it was a long transition. It began probably with the WPA project, WPA project built the connection between the rock and the shoreline. That's basically closed off the north end of the bay, and the bay became a lot more stable at that point. The rest of it began really in 1941. At that point, the United States government was pretty sure that we were going to end up in World War II sooner or later, and they decided to make some improvements in Morro Bay for a patrol base to be built. So they came in, cleared the Willows area, which is the area just north of where the Veterans Building is now, cleared that area, and then dredged a section of the bay to form basically a deeper port, in a consistently deeper port, so that patrol boats could travel in and out of the bay. The breakwater itself didn't come until a couple of years later, in the late 1942. But they did start building the Embarcadero in late 1941 by blasting away a portion of the rock, building a cofferdam, which still exists, and that's the portion that the two T-piers are attached to now. And then the dredge tailings were used to fill in behind that to build up the land well above the normal tide heights, and give them a base to establish, or a footing to establish the base on. From there, several support buildings were built on that area. Later on, in 42, a administration building was built on the bluff just behind where the Veterans Building is now. It was a large, kind of an H-shaped, two-story building that would become later the headquarters for what was the amphibious training base that came along in late 1943, early 44. In between those two times, from late 41, when the Navy first came in, annexed that land, to late 1943, the base which had been built to support patrols, did just that. The idea originally was to support patrol boats, but they found that it was still too difficult to get in and out of the harbor for patrol boats. And so most of the patrol boats were operated out of Avila Beach. However, there was a shore patrol element that basically kept guard on the beaches all the way from just about Cayucas all the way down to Montana de Oro. And to facilitate that, and so that the patrols could watch the beach very, very closely, that's when the trestle was built. And there was a large trestle that was built basically from the foot of Beach Street across to the peninsula. And that allowed the patrols to access that beach easily. After about December, January of 1944, the Navy continued building the Embarcadero all the way down to what is basically the boat launch area, and now at the south end of the Embarcadero. And again, filled in behind a cofferdam made of rock that was blasted from Mora rock.
So, Joe, besides those major features, is there much left that we might recognize from that period in the rest of Morro Bay? The Quonset huts, for example?
Yeah, there's, that in the last count I had, there was about 7 Quonset huts that are still scattered around Morro Bay. There's the most obvious one is the one on Main Street, out near Atascadero Road, the one that has that rather odd, I call it odd, but it's a kind of a nautical facade on the front of it, and it's I believe a antique building now. They sell antiques, and there was another one,
nice, yeah,
about the same size. It was further south on Morro Bay, or on Main Street, just before you leave the city center. That was an antique sales place for a long time also.
Nice. Can I ask Roger that same question? Roger, how would you define, say, Main Street and Morro Bay Boulevard? Can you give us some sense of I don't know, you wrote the book. What are we looking at there?
Actually, what you're looking at is what I saw in the 50s. It was shops in a row, and that was the center of town. And for a long time, it was Highway 1. Yeah. Traffic came through town, made a turn, turned onto Main Street, and went north, unless they stopped for whatever reason to see our city. I don't know what else I could say about that particular area.
Well, let me go back to Mike's question.
It's got a history.
Mike was asking, what of value? Mike, how did you phrase it?
This is what I push. So I said, the longer it takes you to start preserving your history, the less you have of it to preserve. The reason I ask that is because we have virtually no tools on this planning commission to do that. We're figuring that out because we've been having to deal with projects that have some historical significance, but have no tools to try to preserve that significance. So that's why I'm bringing that up. So the longer it's going to take us to create those tools, the more we're going to lose of our history. That's my hypothesis, and I was trying to see if that was true or not.
Well, one of the nice things that Eric was talking about, Roger, and you might help us here too, is that there's just different chapters here in Morro Bay. There's the chapter of World War II, there's the culture chapter, there's the Native American chapter, there's the downtown chapter.
Tourism.
Tourism, fishing, so and even like the transitions in between. Can you shed some light on I don't know, like, can you tell us a story like Dorothy did?
Well, you missed one, which is the pre-history of this town. Why did it become in this particular place, in this particular way? And why is it the shape it is? A lot of those things can be seen if we look for them, and that's what I would say we're trying to preserve, is these little telltale signs that can tell you that something historical happened here. I'll give you one example. If you come into town from San Luis and you come over the hill to, I want to say it's Kern, there's a Y in the road where the road goes straight, but it turns off to Harbor, if I'm correct. And you go down that street at an angle and end up at the existing harbor that's parallel with the other streets in town. That little angle is the line that is the line of the rancho that was let me restate that. That line is demarks where the line between no rancho and one of the ranchos, large ranchos, divides. The reason we are the way we are is because Franklin Riley discovered that this little triangle of land that is the town of Morro Bay and the harbor is not in any rancho. And at the time the land was being divided up in the late 1800s, he was smart enough to put to apply for a homestead on this entire triangle. And then he and his friend divided it up into streets and began to sell lots. And that's how we became a city. He saw the potential in the bay, and that's where it came from. So you can see little telltales of this history if you know where to look. And that's what I would love to see us create, the mechanism for having this brought forward when plans are made.
One of the interesting things for us is as the Planning Commission, Roger, is that we're looking at history at how it relates to planning. And so a history map makes a difference to us. And we think it makes a difference to us because it makes a difference to the community. Dorothy.
Well, years ago, one of the members of the Planning Commission was an architect who taught at Cal Poly. His first name was Willard. I can't remember his last name, but his kids still live in town. And he, as a project for his senior class, or quite an advanced class, he had them do a project, come up with a plan for downtown Morro Bay to beautify it and to make it so that people would want to go to Morro Bay Boulevard, to the businesses. And this is after we were a city. And it was a fabulous plan. And it may still be in the records in the planning department, but it really was. And it was not a grandiose plan. It was very small, little details that made the whole area come alive. And so just, you might want to find it.
I love it. Dorothy, this is not just to flatter you, but one of my favorite painters is Diebenkorn, Richard Diebenkorn. And I've read that he's one of your mentors.
Yes, he gave me an A in all my classes.
That does make him a mentor, yes it does.
Can I ask, Dorothy, also, with respect to when you moved here in the 50s, there was this small community of artists. They're, mind you, more plein air style artists, not artists like what I would call you more modernist. And there was a little art store in town that Don Verteiler ran, and Everett Jensen, another artist, was down the hill from you. Do you have any memories of that particular period about where you were, and was that the art community?
Memories. Oh yes, yeah. We had this very unique neighborhood, which doesn't exist really. I mean, I don't know about any. I mean, our neighborhood still is fairly unique in that people do know each other and like to get together. And it's getting harder and harder because the more vacation rentals you have, the more it breaks up a continuity of a neighborhood. you don't really have a neighborhood because because nobody lives there all the time. But in the 50s, in the late 50s and 60s, we were young families, we had children. Can you imagine our neighborhood, which doesn't have a single child in now, we had a whole bunch of kids running around. We had some empty lots, and that's where they used to play. And the parents, we would all get together at your house, Eric, and talk about philosophy and politics and everything you could think of. And we just had the greatest time. We spent a lot of time together, just visiting back and forth. It was just a wonderful neighborhood for kids to grow up in. You would agree?
Well, and that happens to be my neighborhood, too.
Oh, yeah, it's your neighborhood.
It's amazing how many houses still are there from that period, design, modern post and beam, mid-century, beauties.
Yeah, I think because there are some nice houses in there that you wouldn't want to have torn down. People don't move, they stay. So we have a lot of long-term residents in that neighborhood still, yeah.
Nice. So, Bill, can you give us a little insight? You own some incredible buildings here in town. Do you want to tell us a little history of the harbor?
Yeah, I was actually going to start off first with Mike's question as far as the Embarcadero and some of the buildings.
Sure.
Excuse me. The one that comes to mind right now is a city-owned building. I've talked about it before. It was the original Breakers, the dinner house, built in the mid-50s. And really a classic, if you're talking mid-century modern, it's very much so. It's one that I feel probably should be saved and remodeled or repurposed. And this is actually city-owned right now. And it's really? At this point, it's actually what is it called, the Market Plaza, and it's due to be demoed. And so if you're talking about saving some of the history on the Embarcadero, because in the 50s, the Breakers restaurant was one of the ultimate places. The Breakers Cafe is now Dorn's. And if people don't know, the original Breakers restaurant was built by Harry Amsel. And a lot of the stars from Hollywood would come up. You would see them there, and just a lot of the history. I grew up next to a fat farm for the rich and famous down on a ranch outside of Escondido. And the owner of the ranch were the Zucchellis. It was called the Golden Door. The person that managed that ranch was married to the original flyer in World War II, the Flying Tigers. He later started the Flying Tiger, freight lines and that. And he actually had a restaurant in that building after the Breakers. I'm probably repeating myself. So there's a lot of history there, but the building itself has a lot of really, like I say, mid-century modern, slightly Neutra characteristics to it, and something that I feel, if you want to save the history of Morro Bay, and this one will probably disappear real shortly if it, attention and put into it. And that's just kind of my comment on that. As far as my particular property, my wife and I owned a ranch north of Cayucas called China Point. We originally were picking seaweed for a Chinese seaweed farmer. He was the very last seaweed farmer in California. They had started seaweed farming in the 1870s, 1880s. And he was the last of this generation, and we actually brought in the last crop of seaweed with him. And they were farming nori, and that was kind of the end of that era. And after that, we ended up selling our ranch, moving back to Morro Bay. We purchased the cannery from the Leagues. And it included the old grocery store and the cannery building and a little cottage. After that, back, and that was your original of your oyster industry, the abalone industry, and so a lot of history in the Morro Bay area. With the ranch next to us north of Cayucas was the abalone farm. But I think what a lot of people don't or may not know is when Morro Bay in its heyday was known as the abalone capital of the world, boats would come in so loaded with abalone that they'd almost tip coming in the bay. They would come in with 100 dozen abalone at a time. They were getting $1 a dozen at that time after World War II. So, I mean, after World War II, they were making $100 a day, which is thousands now. But the industry collapsed. There was a student in Morro Bay and a Cal Poly professor. They ended up breaking the code on the Embarcadero on how to reproduce abalone. They never knew it before. So I think there's a little bit of Morro Bay history that people may or may not know, but the code for growing abalone, it's all over the world now. The farm next to us in north of Cayucas took that idea and took 20 years to where in their farm we're farming abalone. But that's another little bit of the Embarcadero that kind of has disappeared. We used to have on the Embarcadero, you had Sylvester's tugs that serviced the Standard Oil out front. Originally, the Stockings were the original ones that had the tugs, and they were just north of the inn at Morro Bay, so there was a tug operation in that area also. I don't know if I'm rambling too much. We also later on purchased a property that used to belong to a silent movie star, Gladys Walton, that my wife and I spent a year restoring the building. The reason I bring it up is this house was built in the 1920s. Gladys Walton did 40 movies, silent movies in the 1920s, and in the later part of her life, she lived in Morro Bay, and this was her residence. She also built the lighthouse, a boathouse, and a windmill house across the street. But at the time we purchased the property in the city, they were hoping that I would tear it down so that I would build a spec home. So getting back to some of your buildings disappeared, some of these are driven by, actually the city is one of the guilty party on taking down a lot of some of the historical buildings. And that's where I'm looping back to the breakers that I think maybe should give it a second look to see as far as possibly hoping to save it. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Bill. Let me encourage, if anybody has questions from the audience, Terry, please come up and you can pick your panelist. Yeah.
It's suddenly occurred to me that I probably qualifies to be on your panel. I'm almost historic. I'm 75 years old, and Eric and I share a very similar background. I was raised in Porterville, and the early years of my life involved my family coming to Morro Bay for a week and going to the Sierras for a week for family vacations. So I first saw the ocean. I caught my very first ocean fish off of the T-Pier in Morro Bay. I think I was probably 5 years old.
Nice.
I continued that association until it was time for me to go to college, and I studied architecture at Cal Poly because I didn't want to go to Berkeley and I couldn't afford to go to USC. So I came here in 1966, right after the incorporation of Morro Bay. I'm a lifetime recreational boater. I built my first sailboat when I was 12 years old.
Nice. Do you have a question for the panelists?
Oh, you caught me.
Okay.
I will conjure up a question. Just give me a second. What would the panelists like to see in terms of configuration of a commission to review and recommend to whoever appropriate preservation techniques for those buildings of significance that exist in Morro Bay.
So I'll open that up to the panelists, but for what it's worth, we're not focusing on that tonight.
Okay.
That will be a future one where we actually get more into the structure of the process.
And I have another couple minutes because I do have some insights of historic value. My father worked for Bank of America, lifetime career, and there is an original Bank of America building at the corner of Main and Morro Bay Boulevard. That building has been preserved by the real estate company that's in there, and the original Bank of America logos, they're cast in the face of the building, are still there. Wow. This was a very historic component of early Bank of America because I have a lifetime history with that. It's of special import to me in looking at Morro Bay today that Bank of America, historically as a company, always followed what they saw as future trends of economic growth. And when they built the new Bank of America building and moved into that, that was a positive indicator for the community. When they closed that building to now become a coffee shop or whatever it is, aside from the fact that the banking industry is changing as a whole, I do not see that as a positive indicator for this community. And I think that we really need to take a hard look at our future development trends and our future preservation. And I recognize that history is only preserved when you choose to preserve it, but history is also made every day.
Yeah.
And what we do today...
I'm going to say thank you, Terry.
That's all right.
I do appreciate it. Christy.
Hello, I'm Christy Van Cleve. I'm a preservation architect, and I live in Morro Bay now, a partner with Bill Roshan. And in the past, in areas that have been trying to preserve their history, especially on a community level, in a large city where maybe they really are interested in the history of the whole city, but specifically in a very historic neighborhood. We used to live in Los Feliz area of Los Angeles. I saw something that was very effective, where the community, the Improvement Association, the homeowners associations, had photo days where they would get together, and especially with a very elderly group that had a lot of history, still tangible artifacts, and a lot of those residents didn't know what to do with that. They hoped it would end up somewhere valuable, or that younger people could take it and scan it, or that these records could be preserved. So I wonder what the panelists think about something like that. And we just, in that association, just called it a photo day, and we invited particular people to come and bring their photographs and share them with others, bring them, take it back home with them. But then that also facilitated the association knew what was around and what people had in their possession that could help with the history. I just wonder if the panelists could address that.
Yeah, Roger, do you have anything to say on that? Did you hear what Christy was asking?
Yes, I heard that, and we have, as a historical society, we have done photo days, and that's a very good way to learn history and discover things you've never known before. To answer a former question, my take on what it would take to codify the preservation of our history is to create some way of including historical preservation as part of the planning process. Every project that comes before the Planning Commission should have a historic component, and there should be rules clearly stated how to follow it. It doesn't necessarily mean that we go everywhere from don't tear anything down to tear everything down, but somewhere in the middle, if it is reviewed as part of the regular process, that would satisfy what I would call historic preservation.
So Roger, that's a great thing. Let me go around the panelists. Joe, could you kind of comment on that same? We're getting near the end of the hour. So
I understand it, but I would just say I would agree with everything Roger has stated on the subject. My own desires would be to see something done as far as being able to facilitate research into the naval base and the amphibious training base that was basically established in Embarcadero. All of the research that I did on my book was all done online, as I live in Oregon, as some of you guys probably know. But I'm sure at this point that there must be a lot more than what I uncovered. My book is based mainly on photographs that I found and a little bit of online research as far as timelines and such. But as anybody that's ever been involved with the military knows, that the one thing the military really does well is keep records. And somewhere in the National Archives, I'm sure there's a lot more to be learned about the base and its involvement with the city as well. And at some point, I would like to see maybe the city facilitate that through some kind of funding and sending somebody in, sending somebody to the National Archives to do some deeper research into it. And that's really about all I can add to it.
Joe, thank you. Dorothy, could we ask you that same question?
Well, okay, this is my feeling about why you're going to have a lot of difficulty, okay? And this is something I think you really should give some thought to. If you want to save things in Morro Bay, you got to get the community behind what you want to do. And therefore, one of the things that's breaking up the sense of community in this town is the vacation rentals and all the ones you need to police that make sure that whatever is licensed is done right. And there's a lot of people around who do it and aren't licensed. You're going to have to really think about this whole vacation rental thing, because it's got to be smaller rather than bigger. I mean, some communities around here don't have any. And I think that's bad for neighborhoods to have too many.
Thanks. Bill, I know you're always nervous about government regulation. How would you respond to this?
Well, I've definitely been on both sides of the fence on regulations. You know, I know. I gave an example last time where it took 2 years just to get a permit to repair 2 pilings. Had the person that we sold our ranch to north of Cayugas, took 18 years to get permission for a building envelope. There was a Chinese, How Wong's house was there. It was almost falling down when we left. They spent $50,000 on the first historical report, and then they had to do a follow-up, I think cost the same again. Kathy Novak was involved on that. I think Susan Stewart was part of that. So I understand the burdens that come with it and private property rights, but I also personally, I love history. We've restored and tried to save as much as we could as an individual. But it's really a balancing act between the private property and, trying to preserve history. So I could definitely see a middle ground as long as, private property rights are also respected.
Yeah, thanks, Bill.
Sure.
Asia, you had a question.
I do, and this is might be a harder question to discuss, but I'm sure that those of you who've been around for so long in the community have a take on it. I don't feel like we can do a discussion of historic preservation justice without discussing non-white history and pre-white history and pre-colonial history. And I know we've talked about, briefly went over, that this was native land before the Spanish were here. My own personal history is that on Central Coast land grants from Mexican and Spanish land grants. And so my white history and idea of the Central Coast is really informed by that. But what I what I wonder is if, even from your living memory in town, if you guys could discuss some of the non-white history. So I know Chinese communities were mentioned. I know that Chinese and Asian communities built most of the West Coast. I know that you guys lived through eras of segregation, things that, we don't have to deal with in our face as much anymore. But when I talk to my grandma who's from the area, she remembers farm worker movements, farm laborer movements. And I'm sure that those things touched Morro Bay, and I'm sure that there were laborers that built the buildings that we're talking about, that were non-white laborers that had really different experiences here in Morro Bay. And so I just wanted to hear if anyone had something either to share about that or something that maybe we could separately pursue.
Panelist, Bill, would you like to answer?
Yeah, I would, because probably one of our longtime good friends who passed away here a few years ago was George Nagano. I don't know if you know the Nagano family early history in Morro Bay. They had the Morro Bay Farms up Little Morro Creek Road and that. And he shared lots and lots of the Japanese history and what they went through, the Manzanar, the internment camps, the 442, just all the different era. And so different ethnic groups, when they came into town, the Swiss, the Swiss Italians, the Portuguese, there are different ethnic groups that all had to adapt and jump through hurdles at times. My wife is, ancestry is half from Mexico and half from Eastern Europe, so I know exactly the Chumash and the Selenians. I know they've been big part in this area. From a small child, I grew up on a ranch that we had Indian artifacts in our area, so I grew up with that. Even to this day, I find arrowheads on the beach, tools, stuff on our ranches where the native population. One of the biggest native villages in this entire area is where the power plant is. When they were building the power plant, there were so many graves and bodies. There was even some of the original foundations that were a couple feet under of their original thatched round houses and that. So this is extremely historic. If you go over to San Miguel and you go to the mission there, you will see the maps of the Chumash, their territory, and the Selenians. And what I find interesting is in the 1770s, the actual dividing line is Highway 41. So in theory, I'm not saying it's accurate, but from Highway 41 or Atascadero Road north was Selenian, from there south was Chumash. So you're right.
Well, and not to interrupt, Bill, but let me add, on the information session too, we've invited Tony and Michael Woody, who are part of the Selenian tribe, and they're going to be here to talk to us about that part of the history as well. Yeah.
Correct. And I'll just add one thing. Tony, her maiden name was Pierce, and the Pierces and the Montgomerys were the early abalone divers, and so they do have the Selenian heritage, but she also has a world of knowledge on, the abalone and that, and she also worked at the original breakers.
Nice. So let me do this because I'm trying to keep us on time, and maybe we could just go around the panel one time, and if you can kind of give us words of encouragement, not just to the Planning Commission, but to the citizens of Morro Bay, why this is a valuable and worthwhile effort. Can I start with you, Joe? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Joe.
Hi. I'm sorry, I wasn't really paying attention. What was your question?
You're supposed to encourage us here and make us feel good. Any idea?
The community, not the Planning Commission, with this concept of preservation. Any thoughts of encouragement?
Oh, gosh, I wish I did. It's something that I've never really been involved with it, and I'm out of the loop as far as Morro Bay, the city goes. As I told you, I haven't lived in Morro Bay since 1973, so I really don't have a good handle on what exactly the mood is as far as preservation goes. I am a history buff, an amateur historian, I would call myself. But yeah, I definitely agree that it's something that definitely needs to be done. And all I can do is offer my encouragement and whatever help I can give along the way. As I said before, it's not a whole lot because I haven't been there. But
well, we're going to enter that in a public record. So you've now committed to help us in the future. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And really
Whatever
a big
I can do.
thank you, because I know this took some effort for you to join us tonight. So thank you, Roger. Do you? I'm afraid to ask. Do you have any encouragement for us?
I do. I've been involved with the Historical Society for at least 15 years. And this effort to codify somehow preservation has come up many times, and we began this process many times. I want to say that I feel encouraged by the current mood of everything and the plan that you seem to have of several informational meetings first, and then so that the commission can create something to present to the board. I think that's an excellent plan, and I have high hopes that it will provide what we really want.
Wow, I'm so glad we invited you.
So thank you all for what you're doing.
Bill, can I ask Roger a question real quick?
Quick one, sure.
Roger, I guess as a planning commissioner, when you're dealing with, say, a couple projects in a period of 3 months, and they can be considered historically significant, wouldn't you say we've hit that point where we need to consider creating a tool to preserve our history?
That's good. It's a good idea. I think we'll learn that as we go through this process.
So
That's the encouragement I wanted.
Roger, thank you so very much. And I know there was a lot of work for you to be with us tonight, too. So thank you. And,
Thank you very much.
And can we reach out to you in the future? Are you willing to help?
Yes, indeed.
Thank you, sir.
As long as I'm able.
So I want to save Dorothy for last. But so, Bill, do you have any final words for us?
Well, probably nothing of any great wisdom, because, I know it's a balancing act between how to put something together and also not step on the private property rights. Actually, I don't, I can't put any blueprint together for you. I would say what I would encourage as far as maybe looking a little harder into the Embarcadero, the breakers. I keep on hammering the breakers because I know it's due to be demoed, and so when it comes up, maybe look into more trying to save it and downsize what the city has in mind.
Great.
And I personally love restoring old buildings, but I also know property rights. So
Bill,
maybe
thank you.
The balancing.
Thanks for being here. Hi to Bernadette. So Dorothy, you get the last word. And a story is good too if you have any more.
Oh, I have a lot of stories, but anyhow, I do want to say something. Roger said, what he said was right. If you can get more educational meetings, maybe you don't have to do it in a big block, but keep the subject open. And because there's a lot of new people in town, and I don't think they're thinking about this at all. And you want to get them thinking and engaged, because anything that you want to do, people will object to it just because that's the way it is. So, but if they start thinking about saving and what they might lose as individuals, they may get more interested. And if you can engage as many people in the community as you can to participate Participation always gets people going. So, I don't know exactly how you could do it, but maybe at every planning commission meeting, you could take 5 or 10 minutes to ask somebody in the audience something.
I have a plan. I think if all the new people in town got to meet you, they'd all show up. It would be so much fun. Thank you, Dorothy. Thanks to our panelists. Quick final words up here on the commission. Joe, do you have a final note for us?
Well, I think one thing that's in order is to thank our chairman for being the initiative behind this. This wildly exceeds my expectations in terms of just the sheer emotional content of this. I mean, it's fascinating to listen to the accounts. It's valuable. It's very endearing. I mean, I regard you folks as sort of it's like the living history of Morro Bay. And it's simplistic to say if we're serious about of historical appreciation, then of course we have to appreciate our history. And then of course, first we have to know what our history is. So I want to thank you personally and for the whole commission for that.
Great. Asia, final words?
No, just thank you for sharing. I hope tonight was recorded.
Mike?
Thank you, Joe, for what you just said. Perfect.
Eric, full circle, you get the final comment.
I think it's just the synapses of our brain fire, right? And they all fire at once. And when we have all the synapses of all the people firing on a subject, you get these tapestries that you don't otherwise get. And the tapestry of Morro Bay is continually unfolding in front of us. And each time I talk to somebody about this subject, I learn a little tiny bit more about Morro Bay. And if there's a way to make that part of our statement about what Morro Bay is, that will be something that everybody gets to enjoy, the locals, the tourists. People come here to find out what we're about, and let's tell them what we're about.
With gratitude and admiration, thank you, folks. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll resume with the goals. Welcome back, everyone. Nate and Anthony, are we online?
You are live and recording.
Thank you both. Scott, are you ready to, let's see, introduce the next item, which is an update of our City Council's adopted 21-22 goals and action items? Do you have a presentation for us?
I do, yeah.
Thank you.
It's coming up right here. Maybe. Oh, there we go. All right. Let's see. Is it not letting me? So I'm going to go over a little bit of the goals process, and then spend a little bit more time on the sort of the action update to these. I'm not going to go over all of the actions, and the staff report does that. You certainly can read that. I'm going to go, but I will go over the ones that pertain to things that the Planning Commission and Community Development Department, might have interest in as it relates to the action items that are in the current goals.
Scott, could you also mention as we prepare, we're looking at possibly doing this in 2 meetings.
Thank you, Chair Roshan. You don't have to make any decisions this evening. We did get a lot of correspondence in late today, so I mean it's kind of several of you probably didn't have a chance.
Commissioners, did you have a chance to look at that? The chamber came in today with it.
Yeah, and
so all of us haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. So we did get some of that in, and I think that'll get some fairly lengthy correspondence in.
Yeah. And it's important. So and we have the time to.
Yeah, I planned it for 2 meetings, so we'll do the kind of the update here, discussion. And then I think we have a couple items we know that we're moving forward. And then whatever else you might come up with, or if there's some information requests that you have from me or something.
Last thing before you start, does anybody, public testimony on this item if you have to leave? Jeff, you're good? Terry? Thanks, Scott.
Okay. So as far as the goal setting process goes for the City Council, we're in the middle of it now. I'll be taking input January through March. We have a community survey that's out there right now. It's on the city's website, so if you haven't seen it, go take a look. We'd like to get your input. We're getting advisory board, input, as well, and then we're also working with the chambers. Has given us input. You'll see that if you haven't already seen it. And they had a squeaky wheel event at the Inn at Morro Bay, and then they've been having different information sessions with the different city departments. Was actually community development last week on Wednesday. We had a presentation at the chamber and kind of gave an update about what the community development department does and that type of thing. That also helps inform some of the goal setting process. Moving forward, the City Council will review that community input in maybe March, April timeframe, and then they'll review and take action likely in the April, May timeframe, and then following that, we'll come up with an overall work plan that's that'll be Planning Commission oriented based on the items that the City Council adopts. Let's see. There was 5 sections to the goals: improve public infrastructure, achieve economic and fiscal sustainability, address housing needs, climate action, and improve community health. The public infrastructure item, had you look at the top of the goal statement. It's address cleanliness while maintaining sensitivity to wildlife. And safety issues in heavy tourism areas, conduct a capital needs assessment, and then traffic and circulation were the main goal statement areas, and then there are several items that are shown in the short-term actions. The fiscal sustainability item was to create a plan to address cities' unfunded liabilities, kind of like PERS being one of those, while striving to achieve competitive compensation, determine potential paths to secure funding for capital needs, focused on the harbor and other infrastructure needs that we have, and support an expedient catalyst site development. Catalyst sites being some of the development areas that are identified in the downtown and waterfront strategic plan. Housing, and a component of this to educate the council on, updated state legislation related to housing. That's ever changing. Identify opportunities for additional housing options and or explore partnerships to support these efforts, and then continue the Community Development Department's efforts to expedite the development review process. There's several items in there that relate to planning, and we'll go over those in a minute. Climate action was to participate with other cities in SLO in the county to support climate action planning efforts, educate the council on just climate action in general, and then consider opportunities to reduce resilience on carbon producing energy sources. Community health was to create a plan to address immediate needs for increasing, this was back when COVID was happening, so you see things related to COVID. COVID vaccination rates, educate the council and staff about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And then I think we have, okay. So we'll go over, I can get to the right slide here. So I'm just going to go over the short-term items that relate to things that planning is related to planning and the Planning Commission and the Community Development Department. So this comes right out of the staff report. So items in blue are things that are ongoing, and you're going to see a lot of blue items. So there's a lot of ongoing things out of the current goals list. Items in red are complete, and then items in black have not yet started. So under the infrastructure goal, initiate work on paid parking pilot program and continue work on a long-term plan. We have a contract with a consultant that's helping us out with the development of this. We have the latest pieces to look at opportunities for the pilot program and where we would charge for parking where we weren't. And so that's probably something that's going to come back in the next couple of months. And it'll eventually work its way through the advisory boards like HAB, Public Works Advisory Board, Harbor Advisory Board, and Planning Commission. One of the fiscal goals is assess viability for business improvement districts for the downtown and the Embarcadero. We were partnered with the chamber on this, and they did some outreach on this input, and there is some interest there. We kind of have the second phase of this where we need to go out and sort of prove that interest and see if there's fiscal viability from that standpoint, or if there's other opportunities, for improvements like EIFDs, infrastructure financing districts. Other fiscal goals, review development opportunities for Market Plaza property.
Can you give us a quick sense of what that is?
Yes. So that was the property that Bill Martini was speaking about in our earlier item, and it includes what used to be the restaurant building on the top of the bluff there at 781 Market. It includes the parking lot below it. There's also an apartment building that has our maintenance crews use the garage, and there's somebody that lives in the apartment. So in that parking lot, that's where also city bathrooms are. Redevelopment of that site would look like a mixed-use development where you would have shops along the Embarcadero frontage, a hotel behind it, a restaurant as well. Idea is to have a higher-end hotel in that location. It's economic development related. And that's about a little under 2 acres in that location, and does extend across the street where the parking lot is at the corner of Pacific and Market. It includes that piece of property there too.
Does it include the street?
Yes, it includes a portion of the street.
You're talking about the street in front of the building, right?
Yeah, that goes across over to the parking lot that's disconnected currently. Let's see, another fiscal goal, continue review of the Vista proposed battery project. This might be an area where, the commission might want to weigh in, especially as it relates to we don't have specific items in here related to the master plan, and so that might be something that the commission wants to talk about. Housing was to complete the zoning code. We've done that. There's a lot of housing-related items in the zoning code that were go-do items that came out of the city's housing elements. So there are future agenda items, our implementation items, sorry.
Do you mind a quick question as you go through? When you say implement housing element, what does that mean?
So the housing item here relates to finish the zoning code. Inside the zoning code are updates to inclusionary housing, ADUs, housing by right policies we're in the process of developing right now. We have grant funding. We ended up with about, I want to say, close to $300,000 in grant funding to make some of those things happen, and we're in the middle of those. It includes the next item on here, housings, develop accessory dwelling unit stock plans. Those are done. That program is done. It's just, it was done under the 2019 code, and we're under the 2022 code right now. And so we're working with the consultant to have them update the plans for the new code. We have promotional materials and a website, basic design of what it's going to look like for when we get the plans updated, so people can have access to it.
And can I just clarify too, real quick, Scott? So that would meet the requirements of the housing element that the state required, right? That most of the locals didn't submit and get approved? Has that been, is that part of that?
Our accessory dwelling units count towards our RHNA numbers, Regional Housing Needs Assessment numbers. But the stocked ADU or accessory dwelling unit plans, we partnered with City of Atascadero, Grover Beach, and Aurora Grande to do those. We grant funding for it, and again, the project's finished basically, but we're updating the plans right now for the new codes, and that'll be available. The plans will be available to folks for free. So we'll hand them out, and there'll be, there's some informational things that go along with it that tell you like how you might want to go and hire a contractor and.
Yeah. You gave us a presentation on it here.
I did. Yeah. Let's see. So one of the requirements that's completed was provide an update to council on new state housing legislation. We did that. Housing element implementation was what I just talked about, development of objective design guidelines. We're just about done with that, it's shown in blue. And then the ADU ordinance that I talked about. We have completed the density bonus and inclusionary housing updates. Those are in the draft or in the zoning code and in effect now. They're not part of the implementation plan that's pending Coastal Commission certification right now. Bring land use amendment for the Seashell Estates property to increase density to medium density or potentially high density. We formed an ad hoc committee and met on that. That included a couple of chamber members, two city council members, 2 planning commission members, and staff. And that's still continuing forward. We're getting ready, I would think within the next week or two, the 10-lot subdivision over next to Casa de Flores is going to submit their application. Complete CityWorks online submittal and plan check application. So that's our electric, CityWorks is up and online. You can submit your applications electronically, and DigiPlan is incorporated into that, and we can do online plan checks, so we don't need paper anymore. We accept paper, but we don't have to have it.
Can you still submit the old-fashioned way?
You can walk in, submit your package all filled out. You can have your rolled-up plans. We don't discriminate. We'll take it however you want to give it to us. It's just the option, the option that people are looking for, and other communities have been going down that road, and we're finally able to get it to happen for us.
And just a brief question about your previous comment about Seashell. The ad hoc committee has talked about this. I'm not aware of those communications, but you're expecting to receive an application prior to any review of the outcome of the ad hoc committee's discussions, or?
The ad hoc committee helped frame the discussion and interviewed the folks that own the property and had some discussion about what increased density might look like there. There are 10 existing lots up there, and it's the road to nowhere next to Casa de Flores. And the current owner, Steiner Development, is looking to put a multifamily apartment-style housing product there.
My question is, I understand what's going on. My question is basically is the project expected to come to us prior to the idea of changing the zoning? Or is the zoning going to come to us?
It'll come to you as a package.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll come to you with both.
Again,
Joe.
I don't want to go into the weeds of that, but I recall when they came to us, the original applicant wanted 27 units per acre, is that correct?
It's not. They were looking at what they could fit out there reasonably, and I think it's going to come in somewhere in like the 40 to 50 unit range is my guess.
Per acre?
No, just 40 to 50 units for the site. The site's like
10 acres, right?
5+ acres. So.
So just let me understand, when you say a package, what's coming to us is a project with an upzone?
Correct.
But with a project?
With a project.
Okay.
It's a good question. It's a good question, Chair Roshan. Thanks for the clarification. Let's see. So one of the items we haven't done, so you see a black item on the list here in black, and it says initiate work with Planning Commission ad hoc committee for review of the planning process. Would like to get some input from the commission on that, and because we haven't started it yet, we needed to get the zoning code and the general plan done, and so some of the things couldn't do everything. So would like to hear what your thoughts are on that item, and then we have several climate ones that follow this. To pursue funding to complete climate action plan updates. We are looking at grant opportunities out there for this. Continue review of the Vistra proposed battery project. Pursue electric vehicle charging station funding. We do have some funding in place now. One of the challenges is not the money right now. One of the challenges is dealing with PG&E. We've been talking to the legislature a little bit, some of our local folks, about maybe helping us out there, because PG&E is months and months out on reviewing plans. When you're talking electric infrastructure, it's horrible, actually, and very unfortunate. It's hard to deploy stuff quickly. Initiate implementation of SB 1383. That's the organic waste for residents and businesses. That's largely run through our Public Works Department. Community development has a role to play as it relates to enforcement. That's underway now and will continue to be so moving forward. Let's see. A few more items that are complete out of climate. Let's create a web page with links to energy efficient website resources. We stood that up, and we probably have several items to update in that right now. Waiting for Cindy Jason, our senior planner, to get back from vacation. Elevate climate crisis to a climate emergency by way of resolution. City Council did adopt a resolution in that vein. Implement 3CE REACH Code incentive program for electrification of new residential construction. We have some links on our website to that. This is also tied to another climate item that talked about putting an ordinance together. Well, I guess I didn't put it on there. Sorry. Let's back up. We developed the REACH code. We did outreach and did a survey and received a lot of concern about moving to an all-electrified code. And so we're paused right now, but getting ready to move forward with an educational campaign on what that actually looks like as it relates to the update with the new building code, because there's a lot of requirements to go to electric infrastructure versus gas and those types of things, which make it a little more palatable, I think. And so we're starting to put together the campaign for that. A couple of other items that are on here, one directly related to the item that was on the agenda prior to this, and the Planning Commission has voted to recommend to City Council development of a historic preservation ordinance. That should be part of your recommendation, because that's, again, one of the things we'd be working on. And then the second item there is related to the downtown design district concept, and the City Council on February 14th voted to form the ad hoc committee, and I'll be doing some work on that this week. So that should be included in the goals, at least recommendations that we forward to City Council. I have a list of questions that I had at the end of the staff report, so it might be something that starts the conversation, or you can go elsewhere with it if you choose to.
Bill, can I ask a question, only because I did speak with one of our guests regarding this item? Can you back up, Scott, only because to the last, right here. I reached out to all of the subcommittee members and discussed this item, which would be number 3, which would be to forward to council a public benefits recommendation for projects. In other words, projects that are coming to Morro Bay would require a public benefits review and requirement, right, Joe, basically. So I talked to Joe and I talked to Sean, which was a subcommittee, and we wanted to see that. We wanted to see an item regarding public benefits. We all agreed tonight that we wanted to see that. So where would we fit that in, Scott? And I did ask our prior council member Heller, that we were going to be discussing that. So if we're not going to discuss it, but I did want that on there as one of the items so how do we do that?
Well, that would be, how you do that is you give direction and have three of you,
That's right.
forward that we do that. Certainly, we have it coming up on a future agenda, that you're going to be discussing it, and, yeah.
So I was hoping that could be something we add. And Joe, if you want to make any comments, Joe, go for it.
Well, why don't we wait for discussion?
But,
Is that okay?
but I wanted to make sure, though, that there could be a 3 here.
Yeah, we can add items here. These are the two that I know about.
Yeah.
Oh, no, we can add as many as we want right now and then decide what we do.
This is a big item that we're going to be discussing at a coming up meeting really fast that we've been trying to do for almost a year now.
We're all with you.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure we don't lose track of that.
Yeah, and speaking to that, like things to add to the item, why I went over the things that we're still working on is because there's a large number of issues.
Yeah.
Like community development had the most items on the list that came out of the goals last time. And as you noted, most of them were blue, so they're not done.
Okay.
So when we're thinking about adding things to the list, you might be looking at, I think we're good forwarding a couple, 2, 3 things to council. If we're going to start doing more than that, we probably need to start looking at prioritizing things that are on there and pushing those down the list or giving some consideration. That's the only reason that I put it together like that for you, is so we can only do so much. I don't want to, you don't want to, overpromise, underdeliver.
And it's an important part of the discussion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I did kind of come up with the list of questions. I can go over them. You have them in your staff report. The first one was, if you had to pick one major priority item for Community Development Department and Planning Commission to work on, what would it be? The other one, number 2, was, do you believe the current 5 city goals reflect the priorities of the Community Development Department and Planning Commission? That was really just a yes or no. And then, what action items should the city pursue related to Community Development Department and Planning Commission areas of interest/authority? And then provide whatever other input you might have as it relates to the goal-setting action. So I'll leave it at there, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Okay, so let's start with questions for Scott, and then with the expectation that I'm asking what the commission wants to do, I'd invite if there's any public comment next before we have our discussion. Are you guys good with that?
I noticed on the list of action items, I saw the Vistra project mentioned twice. Is that just a...
It was mentioned twice because it's related to the climate action goals, green energy, and it's related to economic development component of things too, I believe. That's why it was on.
Fair enough.
Other questions before we go to public comment?
I'll save my questions and include them with comments simultaneously.
Yeah, and I just want to clarify regarding the Vistra, what we just mentioned, because you mentioned it during your presentation. Now, give this commission an understanding about the relationship between Vistra and PG&E and why it's a drag that PG&E has, a lot of time still till they're going to get this in front of them. In other words, what's that real relationship? And why is PG&E dragging this whole thing?
I'm not sure what you're asking me, Commissioner Rodriguez.
Well, what I'm saying is PG&E, you brought up PG&E and the fact that they're not going to be reviewing plans.
They drag on projects with...
Yes.
I brought up PG&E as it relates to the car charging item. What happens is you have to do infrastructure changes and upgrade services if you're going to do fast chargers.
Okay.
And what happens is those have to be reviewed by PG&E, and they're like 6 to 8 to 9 months out.
Yes, okay, good.
And that's them getting to review your plan and then providing comments and you making corrections. And so it's a long process, which is unfortunate because there's a lot of money out there to go do these things. It's just the lag time behind it because PG&E isn't really set up to deal with them is a problem. And that's what everybody seems to be running into right now. It's just kind of an unfortunate situation that we found ourselves in because we're ready to go. We have contractors ready to do the work, but we can't get the last piece done. Which is
it's the substations and the capacity of the substations.
Well, it's the bringing the electric service onto the site, and then putting the panels in place that can support the fast chargers is really the issue.
Asia, do you have any questions for Joe? Are we good? Any public comment? This would be the time to do it. Jeff, please. please come up. Nice to see you here.
Yeah, Feller, nice to be here, member of the public now. Congratulations to all your planning efforts, and Eric, happy to see you on board as a legitimate born and raised Morro Bayan. Great to have you there. One comment I'd just like to make about something that you might want to make or think about doing as a goal. A few months ago, when I was on the council, there was a meeting that Scott Graham attended and Scott Collins attended to basically explain the planning process, because, like I was telling Scott earlier, after 4 years on the council, I still am very confused about it most of the time. And there was a good turnout, maybe 10 or 15 people, and we just asked Scott questions, and it was one of the best things I've attended here in the city. So you might think about sponsoring something like that, not an official Brown Act meeting or anything like that, but just informational, so that anyone who's developing anything in the city and has general questions could come at that time and ask Scott directly, you know, what do I do if this? What if I do if that? And I think a lot of it, what happens in planning and development is a mystery to people because it is very complex. Anyway, I found that meeting really useful, and if we could do more like that, that would be great. So,
Was that recorded on the YouTube channel for the city
I don't know,
meetings?
Scott, was it? I don't know if we recorded that or not.
It wasn't during a council meeting?
I don't think we recorded it. Yeah, it wasn't a
We could record it if we wanted.
Yeah, we
right?
could.
What was it called? Titled?
What was the date?
Explain the planning process meeting? I don't know. So it's something I asked Scott Collins to do because I have a really
That's what it was.
time
I mean, that's what
understanding
it
it.
did.
So it was you and Scott Collins.
Yeah.
And there were 10 or 15 people here.
There were, yeah.
And they loved it, you know.
Yeah.
So
It was just an
I don't know what it was called. Eric,
overall
so.
planning process. That's what it was.
Anyway, if you do more of
Nice.
those, that'd be great.
Jeff, did you have any more comments on the priorities? Do you want to mention anything about, I don't know, the design district was one thing you had mentioned?
Well, the design district obviously is one of them. The thing I mentioned, I did talk with Glenn Silloway, and we're going to try and do some oral histories of the folks here and have some kind of regular event where people can come, regardless of how many years you've lived here. I've only lived here 20 years, but I have a history with Morro Bay that I'd like to share. So it might be a nice community event, and Glenn and I are going to try and spearhead that. So
Great, great. Thank you for being here, of course. Terry.
You can start the clock, because I'm going to do this in under 3 minutes, I guarantee you. I have learned, as I'm working through this process, that 3 minutes is never enough time. You will probably note, depending on which of you have gotten to your email, that I have prepared what I consider a random and comprehensive review of the staff report involving goals. I used a rather unique system for trying to identify particular issues of interest to me. They're my issues. And then I've made sort of random comments about those highlighted issues. It's an unusual format, but it does allow me to provide, in this case, 9 pages of comments that I would never be able to get into the record in a 3-minute
I
period.
actually thought it worked. Commissioners, did we all see that correspondence? Yeah.
I'm taking that identical correspondence to the council next week, and there are lots of issues on there that kind of cover all over the map. I'm particularly supportive of the historical aspects that this commission is involved in. My only difference is that I would like to see it merged with the General Design Review Commission, and I think I've spoken to this before. And that's kind of where I'm at. I have committed this year to attend every planning commission and every city council meeting to the best of my physical ability. I have a number of specific areas of interest that I'm going to continue to pursue, and you will be seeing me a lot. I hope you enjoy it most of the time. I try to be friendly and comical whenever I can, but I do bring research. I have probably 15 hours of research just in this preparation that I turned in tonight, and don't mistake my brevity for lack of depth. Thank you.
Well, you know we give awards for people who come back again.
Oh, I know. I'm going to have to get one of those big Boy Scout banners. The other thing I would point out is that I do have a almost 50-year history in planning. I was a sub-consultant to the County of San Luis Obispo when they converted from traditional zoning and general plan to the land use element that they now use for their planning effort. And I have worked diligently with the county planning department for almost 50 years in working and planning issues. So I have a long history in planning ease. Thank you.
And sincerely, thanks for your participation. Is there Nate and Anthony, anybody in the queue?
There are no raised hands at this time.
Okay, so I will close public comment. Scott, how do you want to go about this? How do we shape this, or we can also ask commissioners for direction? If you guys have any idea how you want to conduct the discussion?
I mean, I'm interested in what all of you have to say. It's why I kind of framed questions here for you. I think you have your own minds and you know what we're trying to do here, so you don't need to follow the questions. The idea is really, is there things that we haven't talked about here that are of interest to you, or of interest that you want to, in any individual one of you want to get out in front of the rest of the commission to see if there's like-mindedness there? I think that's where I would start.
So let me ask you this. If we go to looking at the potential goal items, we can then, let's say we identify 5, we can then discuss that with you in terms of your workload to make a realistic recommendation. Is that a way to proceed?
Mike?
Scott, does that work for you?
Works for me.
I would separate out comments on existing situations as one thing, new ideas as a separate list, and questions probably at the beginning.
Okay. We can decide how long to go tonight. I guess, where would we want to start? Please.
Sorry, so to clarify, we have the goals from 21-22, and we're recommending goals for 23-24.
Yeah, the next goal-setting process will probably, because we just set the new council, will probably be a 2-year window. And so I think it would be of interest to see if you still find the major goal categories as, like, are those legit? Do we need to push away from those? Are we kind of done with one and we need to move something else in there? I mean, that might be good information to have too. That's big picture. And then the individual like action item things that would be in there, I'm sort of interested about that. If there's things that you find that would fit underneath those other 5 goal sections that are new action items, that's really good. But if you come up with other ones that have their own action items that's not on the list, that's good too.
And
Joe?
then,
Oh, sorry.
And
Asia?
then Bill's recommending that we kind of focus on, and I think you said this, 5 bullet point recommendation that's specific to overarching goals.
That would be my suggestion, and that would come from us in terms of our priorities and work list.
But that might include sub-actions to meet those goals.
Good,
Okay.
I think,
Thanks.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you have larger goals and then that kind of the action item things below it, I think is what,
Got it.
Yeah.
Joe?
My approach was, I wonder if it might be a better approach to actually focus on the action items and then come up with a reasonable total, and then you could sort of efficiently look and see, do they fit within all the goals? Fine. If they don't, invent a new goal. But I think the specifics are what we probably should focus on first. Just my thought. I don't know. Because I don't see the other way. I don't think looking at the goals is really going to then either determine or omit an action.
Let's compromise. Let's do a halfway point where we identify any other goals that might be considered that aren't on the list, or to reshape them, and then rather than exhaust the goals, we'll go back and do the action items?
No, fair enough, sure.
That's
Of the 5, goals being public infrastructure, climate.
I think it's more what we're looking at here, like
Okay.
the historic preservation piece, I think is a goal that we've emphasized. I think the downtime design district is one. I think the community benefit piece is a third.
But we're not, sorry.
Oh, no, please, yeah.
We're not looking at, and maybe someone can clarify, there's one that is public infrastructure, there's one that is climate action, that is health and safety.
Yep.
I'm not looking at those as categories.
Scott, how would you shape that? Because that's coming from city goals, right?
So that's what I would say. It would be good for you to have the conversation, because I can actually start characterizing what they are when I hear what you have to say. I think we have the existing goals, and there's 5 of them. And maybe some of these things fit underneath there. Maybe they don't. Maybe they're under something else. And they might be just like updated plans or something like that. I mean, it just depends.
Can I just throw something in there, Scott, that might help? That's why I wanted to push this other one. Say as a part of new developments, especially big ones, like say Vistra. Let's just use that as an example. We're not making a decision. How would that development lead to helping the city in public infrastructure? How would it lead to fiscal sustainability? How would it lead to housing? How would it lead to climate action? How would it lead to community health? In other words, just community benefits. How could a new development of that size lead to fulfillment of any of these?
Well, I mean, as it was mentioned earlier, the battery project is on there under 2 separate goals: climate action and economic, viability. So it's underneath those just because of what the thing would mean there, and the redevelopment. It's not just the battery project. It's what redevelopment of the site could mean from an economic development standpoint, right? There could be a lot of other things that go out there, as well, and including housing, assuming you can remove the deed restrictions that are on the site. So that's how it's tied together, and it's the bigger concept, right? It's not just the best project. That's in play right now, processing it. The other piece of it is the master plan process that we're doing to look at what are some of the other things that could be there, and then what are the constraints putting those things there? Do those things match with the battery project that's proposed, or do they not? And then we're also looking at infrastructure, connectivity. All of those things are big deals if you're going to start putting other uses out there that generate traffic. I mean, a battery project doesn't generate much, but any of the other uses that that would be consistent with the zoning that would remain on the site would be traffic generators.
Got it. So I guess what I would recommend is we go to the in-between path, which is let's talk about potential goal items and see where the commission comes out. I do think there's a few things that are different now than there were like a year ago, which might impact our discussion. And then from there, we can begin to look at action items. I also think it's important to review the correspondence. Terry's letter is really a strong one. Also, the chamber's recommendation need to be considered. And that we all haven't read that today, I don't think. So why don't we kind of go from where we are, and then we can kind of see where we do that. The advantage would be that Scott can help us focus our potential goal items with those 5 larger city goals. Make sense? Okay, so commissioners, besides the first 2 that we have on here, do we want to add to those? Mike, you brought up community benefits.
Yeah, and I would like to add that to the list, which would bring us up to the max of 3 probably, but I just see that as being something that the city should be requiring moving forward of all projects, that, especially the larger ones, that there be guidelines for public benefits and community benefits that are driven from those projects. In other words, and come back to the community that are more formal versus trying to negotiate. So
can we talk about the action part of that so we understand what we're asking of Scott and what Scott thinks it is?
Yeah.
What would you say are the action pieces of the community benefit discussion?
And just as an FYI, that will be coming up. We will be discussing the memo, the community benefits memo, in our second meeting in March. We would have done it at the first meeting, but I'll be in Hawaii. So I have to be here for this because we've been working on this for like 8 months. So second meeting of March.
So community benefits, my expectation is Planning Commission is going to review it. We're probably going to end up with we're going to decide where we're applying the community benefits list. Really what we're applying it, though, because we don't have, is really only be in the areas along the waterfront at this point, because those are the areas that are subject to the waterfront master plan, which is where community benefits come in. They don't come into the other projects necessarily as part of the zoning code and those types of things. Now, it's not to be said that there couldn't be community benefits discussions as it relates to other projects, and maybe the list helps with those. It's just not codified, right? Meaning it's not in code.
Yeah.
It is in code on the waterfront because the waterfront master plan is part of the zoning code.
I have a question. Having not been part of this process prior, I haven't been part of the community benefits discussion, but in my experience, typically discussions like this have a plus column and a negative column, and it's called constraints and opportunities. How do you differentiate community benefits from constraints and opportunities, and why are we not also including some sort of constraint side to the discussion?
Yeah,
Community benefits in this term, I think, is a different thing than you just described.
So I mean, a little bit of the background, Commissioner Meyer. We were seeing a lot of projects, largely on the waterfront, come forward, and they're required to provide extra community benefit, meaning not regular community benefit that comes along with a project, like you have to build the harbor walk on the water side. That's a requirement. That's not extra anything. That's a requirement of your project. You don't get to count that. And you need the extra public benefit if you say you want to go to 2 stories. Because otherwise it's 14-foot height limit down on the waterfront. If you go to 4 and 12 pitch, you can go to 17 feet. But if you want to go really 2 stories, then you got to have the extra public benefit. And that's like, we're going to provide public bathrooms. Is that a good thing? We want
So it's an in lieu fee type of situation.
It's kind of like that. If you're going to ask for something like you want a deviation from one of the applicable development standards that are in the waterfront master plan, then you have to do extra public benefit to get it because it's in a plan development overlay.
But it's a negotiation.
Yeah.
So what the commission has attempted to do is to introduce a parlance so we can begin discussing it. And also, I think, to become familiar and comfortable with the idea of asking for it. Ultimately, we can make recommendations as a commission. Tell me if you think this is right, Scott. But it usually comes down to the council, of course, deciding how to prioritize those one benefit over another, right?
Yeah. I mean, they're going to rely on the planning commission largely because it's what the planning commission does. But yes, ultimately the final decision on waterfront properties resides with the.
So let me be specific. If, as an action item, let's say we agree to what the good work that the subcommittee has done, what do you do with that? How do you then integrate it into either the code, et cetera? And I'm sure you have to go to council at some point to.
We would get the recommendation out of the planning commission, and I would take it forward to city council and have them adopt it as guidance for review of projects on the waterfront.
And it is guidance, right?
Correct. It's not a mandate. Because the lists that the subcommittee came up with, there's lots of stuff on there.
But it would also be it would also be guidance in those situations away from the waterfront where an exception of sorts is being requested. That's a fair reading? Yeah.
I think if we have it, it can be used in other areas. I think that's the best way to put it.
Other questions about the community benefits piece? And we can parse it further once we decide what the priorities are. That's the halfway thing, yeah, for action items. I'd like to introduce a 4th one for our consideration. As an overview, I guess I'm very excited about our success around the historic preservation effort. Very, very thrilled, I think, for all of us that council has embraced that. Have they?
I'm sorry.
Has council embraced the preservation piece yet?
The historic preservation piece, they have not weighed in on it.
So that's still in their goal.
Yeah, they're aware that that's a strong desire of the commission. They're also getting hit up on the outside from members in the community that have that same interest. So it's come up in multiple conversations I've had with one-on-ones with council.
So in this effort that we're doing in terms of action items, do we have to define around that idea what next steps would be? In other words, do we need to look at looking for grants to bring in consultants to help with a possible ordinance? Do we need to look for a regulation in terms of a certified city? Are there a series of action items that would impact that goal?
I think certainly there are levels that we're going to have to decide on, as far as what the ordinance looks like. I think it's probably, we could be super specific right now, but it probably takes us getting into it a little bit before we actually decide where we're going to go with it. So I don't know that you want to be super prescriptive in the
We
front.
can't probably be at all.
Yeah, because I don't think the draft ordinance is an example, right, as an opt-in thing. We've certainly heard others in the community favor it being mandatory in certain circumstances. Like what those circumstances are, we don't.
And we don't know yet.
Yeah. So,
all right. The design district, the council has embraced that.
Yes.
And so the next step will be we're going to look at a subcommittee, which has yet to be shaped by council.
Yes, we're going to create this the ad hoc committee. It's going to be framed more along the lines of the ad hoc committee that we did for the short-term rental ordinance. That has stakeholders from multiple areas in the community. That example was we had hoteliers on it, we had general citizens on it, we had folks that operated vacation rental management companies. Just multiple people were on it. This one's going to be something along those lines. I am still hopefully going to spend a little time tomorrow wrapping my head around the general idea of what options might be for it.
So how far can we go with action items on that piece?
I think there's some connection between preservation and the guidelines. If we made it, might make the two ride together through the process of being approved or put out there by the council. Whereas if you make them completely separate, independent items, it's likely that one of them might get ignored. And I think that we probably all have the feeling that both of those things work together.
So I think that's consider including the downtown design district conversation as part of the historic preservation item. I think we would want to do something along those lines. I'll bring back specific wording for you if you're comfortable with that concept. I'll bring back wording for you next time so you guys can review it.
Okay. Asia?
So to clarify, the design district would fall under the goal of historic preservation?
No.
Okay.
It'd be a new goal. I think Scott already gave it to us, and that is a goal titled City Policy Update.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as a larger goal heading earlier was, city policy update, because before we had, general plan update and zoning code update from earlier goal setting sessions that predated the current one that's in front of you.
Could we try and, in our discussions, make
Sure.
a little bit of discipline in terms of goals versus action items? Because I'm getting a little confused too. So are we thinking that historic preservation ordinance would be a goal or an action item?
Let me wait for Scott here.
I believe it's an action item underneath the goal, and the goal is city policy update.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
The goal is 6 out of 5.
But
I'm nervous about that because the city policy update is a pretty big umbrella.
That's why you have the action items that are specific. So it would be, the action item would be development of a historic preservation ordinance, would be development of a downtown design district. Underneath the downtown design district, we could have the, tying it to the historic preservation effort, because we don't need to waste our time. We're doing two things that could be mutually, beneficial between those two items. So I think it could be that. That's what I came up before. Certainly there are other things we could call it, but that was what I was thinking.
I just want to make sure it's not so generic that those items get tertiary as action items rather than as goals.
Yeah, I think it's those two specific things. When those are both city policies that we're going to be updating.
Okay.
They're just, they're different ones.
It might flow out of other goals as well, which would include housing, because housing ties back down into both those action items, and if you cross-reference from goal to goal to two action items.
I think they do, but what happens is the housing includes much more and much bigger stuff. So I hesitate a little bit if we're not being specific enough to be effective.
So the good thing is, housing's one of the existing goals. And so we could add action items underneath the housing goal, all right, that exists now. If you're thinking, oh, we should tie it to some of these other things that we're doing, just so that there's cross-referencing going on, so we know we're doing that,
To be
is an
clear,
option.
I wasn't advocating one approach or the other. I just
Got it.
wanted some clarity. So, I mean, because there are a lot of considerations that go into whether we're more explicit as a goal.
No, it's a good question. I think we're not quite there yet.
Yeah, so, again, I just wanted to know what we were talking about as how we're actually going to organize it.
I'm not sure.
Just to counter your worry, Bill, if each of these, what might have been an action item, instead becomes a goal, we have, I think, at least two already. And so that then pushes our overall goals from 5 to 7. Is that which is more onerous in the eyes of?
Right. Asia, did you have
I
a?
was just wondering if there's a slide with all existing current goals on one slide that you have.
You showed us that one, Scott.
It's just with those 2 goals.
Oh, the 5, yeah, the 5.
Right.
Yeah, and the other thing, Scott, really, really quick, I like what you said about while you're in the process of doing your job, you've got a limited time to do what you're going to be doing on behalf of this commission as well as the council. But if you can knock out 2 of these in the process of collecting information and public participation, if you can do design district and ordinance, historical work, you know what I mean? That's a great way to get things done, right? You're more efficient, you're able to do more and not have to do it all over again just for another item, right? So I agree that if we can combine these and get the information, get the participation, and get the work done.
So right now what we're talking, I know we haven't solidified this, but we have already come up with 3. We're aiming for 5, and there's 5 existing ones there.
That's the cities, right?
So I think the historic preservation ordinance, design district, and the community benefits can all fall under updating of city policies.
But that's not on the list, right?
So that would have to be a goal that would, like, we would add to this list, you would add another bullet point that says updating city policies. Underneath it, you would have these
Those
3
actions.
These 3 things.
And so one more kind of finesse question. The planning commission's goals could vary from the city council goals?
Yes, you can make recommendations. Well, I mean, vary from them, meaning like, this would be, the new policy thing would be something that's new for them.
Right, but it would also be issues that we're looking at from our perspective. Like, say, for example, public infrastructure is not something that we do much with.
You do not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be on our recommended list because of that.
I mean, yeah, unless there's things you wanted to, slide into there or something as an action item or something, I guess. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to open up public comment. Jeff?
Help.
I don't want to add confusion to this, but my understanding that are these the goals that were made with the prior council, and the current council would be establishing new goals in the next month or 2, right?
Correct.
So I'm not sure why we're looking at these. Maybe you can explain that to me. Or should this process wait until the council establishes the new goals?
The council is looking to hear from the different advisory bodies to help them with that, I
To
think.
establish the new goals.
so we
Thank you
can
for
ignore
explaining that to me.
Yeah.
You're putting together goals that you're going to inform the new council for their goals.
Right. And what I'm saying is our perspective is things that are important to us, we're not necessarily looking at the entire city
Right.
position.
Okay.
I agree with that. I don't think you have to confirm the 5 goals that are sitting on this slide right there.
Okay.
And I think Mr. Heller is 100% correct. This new council is going to decide what the new goals are. My only point behind all of this is there's a lot of action taking place with the current goals, and so it's unlikely that they're going to throw them all out because there's a lot of work that's ongoing right now with them, and so they might get brought forward. Maybe they're called something slightly different, or maybe they're adding action items because we're completing some of this stuff. But
So I'm going to suggest a process for us tonight.
Before we go on, I just want to say one thing. I think you're
please.
absolutely right, and my experience with goals is they don't change that much from council to council, and they change them every 2 years, which I think we shouldn't do that. We should keep it for 5 years or 10 years. So they will tweak a little bit, maybe some different names, but that's my take. Thank you for clarifying that, because I learned a lot tonight. I should come more often.
Thank you, Jeff. So let me make sure. Here's what I'm going to say, what we do in the next 10 minutes, and then we'll go from there. What we're trying to do is come up with the things that are the most important to us mostly after the work we've done in the last year.
Yep.
And we want to focus those. I'm not so sure I care how they're titled or how they're labeled, as long as we can make a clear priority of these 4, 5, 6, 7 things. And right now, what we've got is we've got the historic preservation thing, we've got the downtown design district, we've got the community benefits piece, and I want to add one more to that list, and then we can figure out how to label it. The other one that I think is critical, and I'm putting this out there for all the commissioners to comment on, we're in the middle of a master plan process around the power plant. And roughly, help me with this, Scott, the power plant is the battery storage thing is looking at 12 acres, that leaves...
22-ish, I think.
22 acres, that leaves how many acres to be considered for other repurposing and
There's another
rehabilitation?
60 on this side that doesn't include Lila Kaiser Park.
And the master plan is looking at how to evolve, improve, possibly develop those 60-plus acres with an attitude towards the Embarcadero and downtown. So it's a master plan that's looking specifically at that development, but also a cohesive look,
It's doing a little bit of a constraints analysis. It's also looking at what are the things that we would like to see there. Concept behind it is this is phase 1 of the master plan, and then if we would do a phase 2 when we have a project developer, that type of thing come forward to solidify, what the specifics are of that. But we'll be doing, touching on infrastructure related to things that we would need there, circulation, those types of things. So, yeah.
So I guess what I'm thinking, and I'm asking your advice on this, is that, commissioners, that even though we're already doing the master plan, I think it's really critical that we raise it to a higher level of awareness and participation and focus. That we make sure that there's a community connection here that is vital and vivid, and that the master plan would come back to Planning Commission on a regular basis to do that communication, to get our input, but to elevate the effort and maybe, offer ways to expand it or define it even more clearly.
Are you raising the master plan to cover the entire site?
This would be the entire site excluding the battery storage piece, which I think is the way it's defined now. So to change that, which I'm not excluding changing that, but that's right now not an option in the way the master plan's being conducted.
I just bring it up because the public's had a pretty big outcry about this process around that subject.
Yes, it's because they're conflating the two together at this point, which I understand why they're doing it. But really, the master plan, the battery project is in-house and has been in-house for quite a while. The master plan requirement is a requirement of the city's general plan. When development of the site is proposed, you have to move forward with the master plan piece.
So it's being driven by the battery storage project.
Yeah, we wouldn't be doing it otherwise. Correct.
So I guess that's an important point, because how do we parse that? And what I'm suggesting is right now, I don't know if our goals can I mean, we don't have a position on the battery storage plant right now. We would have to take that on as a whole separate effort. And I think, for me, that needs to come from council. Scott, can you opine on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's very difficult for you to do much of anything as it relates to the battery project now, because you can't predetermine the outcome of the thing, and it has to come before you.
I don't know how we would do it.
It would be very difficult, and which is why we're doing it the way that we're doing it. It's so that you can continue with the master plan process and know that the battery is coming along with the environmental impact report that's going with it, and it's going to come before this body. You're going to see it, and you're going to be making recommendations to City Council one way or the other on it, and you're going to be reviewing the EIR, and you're going to be asking questions about that. That process can't be predetermined as part of the master plan piece of it, because it is a project in and of itself and on its own. Right?
Our opportunity then is the master plan, which is ongoing, happening, and we can not just ask to understand it, we can offer to influence it.
Or do the work. Do the work, because that's our job. We're the planners, so the council is busy. And I know that there's a desire on the council to give that work to the planning commission, some of that work. Is that true or false?
No, I mean, that's what we're working on a master plan. You're the planning body for the city. You're going to be making the recommendations, the tough decisions in it, forming what it looks like before it goes to the city council. You're not going to make a recommendation on something that you don't like or don't think is a good document.
I guess my point would be, this is one of the most important sites on the Central Coast, not just in Morro Bay. And certainly, it's absolutely critical to our city. It's really important. And I think the timing is now for us to engage. That's why I guess I would like to raise it as a goal item, to elevate it, the same way we elevated preservation and said, let's find a way to engage it and make it timely.
Yeah, and in fact, I think that there's energy on the council to elevate that whole, what you just said, there's energy to elevate it. So who's going to do the work? The planning commission elevated it, we elevate it. Let's give it to the, that's the.
I think the other important thing is, one of our goals is to be a bridge with the community. And so we need that public transparency around the master plan.
And public participation.
Is awesome.
That's right.
The forum's awesome.
That's right.
And I
So
think
that's
that
what this would elevate, I think.
there's a number of other components that are more minor, but would be good to attach. And those are the ongoing waterfront master plan, the ongoing, the circulation concepts that are being discussed or being asked about with respect to pedestrianization between the downtown and the waterfront, pedestrianization and circulation around the waterfront.
Is there a way, Eric, and I'm asking Scott as well, to define that through the master plan? In other words, if this vehicle is the master plan, which gives us our frame, our opportunity to hold a hearing and to do a review, the circulation plan, for example, is being considered by the master plan.
It is looking at circulation as it relates to what happens there. I mean, clearly.
So
they're absolutely intertwined, circulation and zoning. And
but
planning.
we would have the opportunity then to address the circulation plan by way of the master plan study.
As it relates to the development of that site, you can look outward as it relates to maybe some deficiencies in the circulation system that lead into it because it's connected. We will be in the waterfront master plan, we're also, while not on this list right now, we're also looking for opportunities from grant funding opportunities to bring that forward, and that would be a potential change to goals later on down the road if we're able to identify a funding source, because there are multiple out there, and our general plan is based on resiliency, and so that's climate adaptation, okay? And there's a lot of money out there for climate adaptation, which would get us into the update of the waterfront master plan, so.
Yeah, Joe.
Who's financing the master plan for that portion of the property exclusive of the battery site?
Vistra is paying for it.
Okay.
Vistra's paying for it. The city hired the consultant.
Yeah, Vistra's paying us, and we're paying the consultant, yeah.
And
we have a reimbursement agreement for all costs associated with the project. They're paying my salary on the project, Cindy's, our city attorney's office, yeah.
Is there city-owned land that is adjacent to the project, or is it separated by intermediate parcels, i.e. the old sewer treatment plant?
That's across the creek.
But is it an adjacent parcel, or is it separated by intermediate parcels?
No, there's when you go across the creek, it's city-owned property with Cayuga Sanitary District.
My question then would be, what is the parameters of this larger master planning effort that you're discussing?
It stops at the creek. We do have a master plan requirement.
But it doesn't
Based on the Vistra property, right?
It's just the Vista property, and then it looks at, it's because it's, the overall thing is 100 acres, right? It also, because it includes Lattikizer and some other things, it's just.
It just strikes me that there's some sort of surplus land that the city might have in some point in the future, and immediately adjacent to this master planning effort, and it might be a good idea to at least partially include some discussion over that land as well.
So there's a couple of issues with that, and they're largely related to money. There's also a policy that says we'll do a separate master plan for the wastewater treatment plant site. We can't Vistra's not going to pay to do the master plan for the city's wastewater treatment plant old site. So that's the problem. I mean, recognizing that it's there is fine, but it's probably a bridge too far, literally.
I think that's important to this discussion, because what we have to do is I think we have to adopt goals that are
big, fat, and hairy.
No, the other way around, that are actually defined, that are shaved and clear.
Okay.
Pretty good.
I think we need to see what we can offer.
I don't even know how to phrase this, but is there a concern, presumably this master plan comes at the encouragement of Vistra?
No, it's part of the requirement of the general plan. So Vistra is paying for it, and tell me if I'm saying this right. Vistra has said again and again they're not developers. And so the master plan is really being written for others.
It is. I mean, arguably it's, when we went through you were there, Commissioner Graff, you were there from the beginning. So when we went through the planning effort for the site, it wasn't owned by Vistra, right? It was owned by Dynegy, and they were pretty much arm's length. They didn't really want to talk to us about anything. We offered, engage us in the general plan because we're telling a story about what's going to happen on your 100 acres right next to the ocean in Morro Bay. And they did not want to engage with us at all. We made repeated efforts, and we were rebuffed. So we put kind of placeholders in the general plan, right? We said, well, it's next to the water, we'll do land use and zoning, visitor serving commercial, but we're going to require a master plan for it. So when someone does come forward, because at the time we were talking with folks that were coming out of here, and the Dynegy property was, all of their properties in California were for sale. So their Moss Landing facility, Oakland facility, and Morro Bays were for sale. And so we thought, and we were seeing these development teams come through, brownfield redevelopment folks come through, and we were talking to them, so we thought something in the future might happen, but we don't know what it's going to be, so that's why the master plan requirement was placed on it. So it's kind of part of one of the benefits we're getting out of the project and having it move forward is that they're required to do that, and they're required to fit the bill.
Got it. But I don't recall how the battery site was excluded from the need to do a master plan. How did that evolve?
They submitted their battery project early on in the process. They actually submitted it and then withdrew it and resubmitted it. And he said, okay, well, we're processing your battery project now, and now we have to do the master plan. They wanted us, to see if we could make changes to it so they didn't have to do that or whatever, because they weren't interested in it. We said, well, this is our certified LCP, coastal, everybody agrees that we're doing a master plan, so we're doing a master plan. They finally got on board, and then, we started moving forward with to identify a consultant and that type of thing.
But to be clear, the battery site is not part of the master plan.
It is part of the master plan. It's identified in there as what's, it
But it's defined as the project in the master plan.
Okay, so it is included in the master plan that we will be examining. Okay.
So to the short answer to your question is, would the commission consider adding itself to the master planning process as a forum for the public to?
We're already part of it. We want to raise it, elevate it, create, I think, more public forum around it. And I think we want to process it in a way that we don't wait a year and then get something that's finished.
So the answer is, yeah, I'll second you on that one.
All right. So
Again, I'm still puzzled by this because I just recall the earlier comment. If we make this a goal and we are examining some aspects of the master plan, but we will not be able to examine that part of the master plan that is part of the battery site.
What do you mean examine?
Get to know the
Debate.
specific details, I guess.
So remember, this is private property. And the private property owner has submitted an application for a battery project. That's the project.
and that's what created the master plan.
Yeah.
So what we're trying to do is not only be responsible but legal and use a vehicle that's in place to focus the energy that we can. And I guess, the parsing is that we're using the master plan, which, I don't know how we do the discussions around the battery storage, but that's a separate discussion, I think.
So all of that's going, the battery project and the master plan will be examined under the single EIR. So it's all connected, and you're going to be looking at all of it at the same time. So it's not like it's this thing that's over here and it's not connected to the process. It's completely connected, and you'll be seeing it all at the same time because it's on the property and it's the project that they submitted. So
I think the difference is, correct me if I'm wrong, that Vistra is not Vistra, although they own the rest of the master plan property. They're not interested in being the developer of that property. So now as a planning commission, we're saying we want to take a very active role in deciding with the city what goes into that property or how that property is planned.
that's the concept, I think, in a nutshell.
So let me do this. I'd love to end at 9 o'clock. Eric has some really important TV that he needs to see. So if we do it this way, I'd like to see if we can get any other, let's call it, goal items identified. I think we can digest this, and I think at the next meeting, hopefully come back with additional ideas, inputs, the chamber letter, look closer at Terry's letter, and see how it relates to what we're looking at. And at that point, we start to identify the action items that we want to prioritize beyond.
I'll have them broken down based on what you said so far, so you have something to start with, and then we'll go from there at the next meeting.
So,
Make
Asia?
What if we're deciding that these are the 4 things? Or 4?
We're not done yet, right? So I'm asking,
Okay, I have another one.
yeah, I'm asking, please, I'd love to hear it.
Okay. Actually, this one I think falls under housing, so it doesn't need to be a big G goal. But something I would like us to discuss are some housing item actions, specifically around investigating some kind of affordable housing incentive program and ADU development. That's something we've discussed.
So we would make that one of the considered goals.
Would you consider adding in other zoning typologies such as perhaps
Totally. Incentive.
bungalow court zoning or other things that would encourage the same outcome?
Yeah, basically, how can we, as a planning commission, pursue incentive options or programs that are available outside of the city?
Ideas.
To integrate into.
So a friendly amendment, we're talking about housing policy, but we're looking at opportunities around specifically affordable housing, the displacement issue.
No, I'm just talking about incentives that we don't currently have. Some kind of incentive program for affordable housing
So what's the vehicle that gets us there?
Well, I mean, I was specifically thinking about the ADU, about ADU development.
So you're going back to like that info session that we had, that thing?
And looking at, what other programs and.
So do you want to limit the housing piece around the ADU piece?
No, that's just one action item of.
One action
lot.
item of the affordable housing thing, all right.
And so I don't know if maybe there was an extra one.
I've just seen a lot of other communities create special, what they have often called bungalow court zoning, which creates a very restrictive form-based code design around very small building typology, 700 square feet, 600 square feet on very small lots, created out of a normal, like let's say it's a 10,000 foot lot downtown, you can create several smaller lots out of that, if they subscribe.
So hearing what Eric's saying, what Asia's saying, we're looking at a more creative, inventive way to look at this that's very maybe specific to
Doing
creative alternatives that are specific to Morro Bay, that fit our community. What is the vehicle that we accomplish that through?
So this is, a lot of these things, and it can fall under the housing goal for sure. The bungalow court idea would just be changing some language in the zoning code, because we have a plan development overlay that's a real plan development overlay that would allow for them now.
Is there a minimum lot size?
No. Yeah,
Okay.
we left it to be a flexible tool because we saw these other things out here, but we didn't want to, we didn't have the time where.
If there's no minimum lot, in other communities, I've seen the minimum lot size kill it, but if there's no minimum lot size, I won't push it any further.
Yeah, okay.
I'm thinking of creating a space to learn about maybe as a commission and potentially pursue creative programming around affordable housing that isn't already being done. And to see what kind of funding is out there. That's probably
So let's add that to the list.
Yeah.
So that's is that number 5? Okay.
So I have one.
Yeah.
It's kind of along the lines of the master planning of the power plant site, but it's a smaller site. And it's the connection between downtown and the waterfront has always been this sort of no man's land, because we accidentally stuck a lot of motels between our downtown and our Embarcadero, and we also didn't really connect them very well, except with this awkward, what now has become an elderly staircase. And we just happen as a community to own that site, and it would seem to me that that location offers one of the most spectacular potentials in town, and to leave the responsibilities of the coordination of whatever happens there to the vagaries of closed-door meetings is unfortunate. And I believe that site warrants the city community's input, and through the forum of the Planning Commission, we could offer the city fathers, this council, a much broader range of opportunities or ideas.
So we heard Bill question that earlier in the panel.
It's already, so the whole
But can you tell us where we are?
The whole Centennial, stairway thing was reviewed by the City Council, Planning Commission, City Council back in 2016, 17. We have a plan for it. The idea is that, that the development of the adjacent property, if it were to move forward, the Market Plaza property would bring with it the development of the plaza, the reconfiguration of the stair and the slope there, and recreation of a plaza, in the area, keeping the chessboard. That was one of the things that was a part of it as well. So we do have those.
So that's driving the discussions that are happening.
But can you let us know where we are in terms of the progress?
Having not seen those discussions, it's hard for me as a citizen and also as a planning commissioner to make heads or tails of what's actually occurring in it. I don't see I would like the Planning Commission's oversight.
Well, what I'm trying to figure out is where are we? I know there's negotiations going on with the developer. Are those still in progress?
Yes, we have a closed session item to discuss it at the next, but it'll be either next Tuesday or Wednesday.
So what can you tell us tonight that would help inform us about how to address this? We've never been, I mean, I've never seen a presentation on it in my 3 years here, 2.5 years.
It's just that I see all these simultaneous concepts around the same location. People talking about vehicular circulation, we talk about pedestrian circulation, we talk about the connection between uptown and downtown, and yet none of those things are being, I don't know, are those things being considered in this specificity revolving around this one little site that happens to be at the center of the target?
Well, yes, okay, so we have a downtown and waterfront strategic plan that was put in place, and it talks about those connections that you were referring to, Commissioner Meyer, and, ways to improve those connections. And it talks about, as a catalyst site, it talks about the Market Plaza property. And inside of that talks about the plaza improvements that we've made to the Centennial Stair area, so.
So let me go back to my question. I'm trying to see if there's a vehicle here for us to have that discussion. And because negotiations are going on, how would we structure this goal to be involved in that potential development?
Well, you'll be involved as the Planning Commission, assuming, I get authorization to move forward. I have to think about it a little bit.
So we have 2 weeks to the next meeting, so let's put that on the list, not knowing exactly how we're going to deal with it.
What is that?
What is that?
I think I'm just interested in a continuing forum around that discussion, as opposed to we talked about it 10 years ago and we're working from that plan. I don't know that 10 years ago is exactly where we are today. Things have changed somewhat, not tons, but some. And I think it merits an ongoing discussion rather than just saying, oh, nope, we're good. You'll get to see it after it's all decided, after it's all planned.
I think Eric is asking, and we're willing to wait for you to come back with a structure that would allow us to do that.
So, Commissioner Meyer, are you talking about the whole thing, or are you just talking about the public improvements?
I'm talking about essentially how whatever gets planned there on that specific private property interlaces with the surrounding public property so that we can condition so that we don't just come in later and have to condition a project that's already been through a ton of design, and they have already been informed of kind of what the more contemporary, larger constraints outside their own site are, so that they can be aware of those things and design them into the plan from the get-go. Not dissimilar to what Terry's been talking about in some ways about a design review before the design review kind of thing, before it gets to PC level.
Again, I'll give some.
Yeah, and at that point, I know Terry's been standing there for a while, so can we go ahead and start chiming in, Terry?
Absence of a chair?
No, I'm the acting chair.
Thank you. So Terry, if you could just wait until Bill gets back.
Sure.
It hasn't been open. We should
follow
the procedure.
That's fine.
Next.
Technically, he opened it a minute ago, but I just didn't get a chance to get out.
I thought from the beginning, because Bill did tell me, that we were going to follow an open process, so we're not so formal. So why don't we just go ahead and open it? I'll go ahead and formally open it up.
You have a vice chair.
You've been standing there for.
I prefer to wait until the chair gets back. Thank you.
Yeah, here we go.
Okay.
Come on, Bill.
Almost got usurped.
Yeah.
You do have a vice chair.
Don't want to do it.
I came here to talk about the goals issue. I'm loving all the other conversation, but I just had a couple little things.
Okay.
5 fingers, 5 goals. 5 is a magic number in terms of developing procedures. This has nothing to do with what they are. It's just the way it works. I drive a lot of my work based on outlining, and what I see here is 5 goals with a million things underneath them. What I was looking for when I was trying to somehow make sense of the staff report was a way to outline this. And what I hear you saying is there are all of these pieces. Well, the reality is, if you look at the titles and make subtle changes in them, and I think the key is that the Vistra showed up in 2 categories. Well, I think every one of these things could apply in multiple categories as is pertinent to the top category. And I think you need to develop an outline form that has more than one subcategory under each goal. For instance, improving public infrastructure. That's a goal, okay? But there are components. There's all these master plans, and there's all these things going on. You could have a subline for the master plan for the Vista property, the master plan for downtown, the design downtown. Each one of those could be a subline. And then in those sublines, you could have, is it appropriate for this to have historical or architectural or design review? Is it appropriate to have housing overlays? This kind of outlining, I think, is lacking in the goal statement. I think if you broke that outline down, you would find a nice place to put a lot of these issues in multiple categories as they are pertinent to the head category. That's all I have.
Yeah, got it. Commissioners, we've got, I think, how many goals do we have now? 5? 6. With the addition of the, what do we call it, Market Plaza?
Downtown waterfront connection.
Yeah, I would call it downtown waterfront connection.
Okay. And we don't know the vehicle for that discussion yet, right? No. You're going to think about it?
Sorry, correct.
I suppose it's public access. I do recall the plan and public comments about the plan. Is that publicly accessible?
I have to go back and look. We've had a couple of different ones that were out there in the past.
I'm left with the conclusion that it would be a good idea for, since we all seem to be interested, for everybody on the commission to acquaint themselves or reacquaint themselves with the plan and the public comments and pretty significant criticisms of all plans presented. Particularly if this is being used either informally or formally as a sort of a guideline or concept of what the community is going to find acceptable there.
I think this is helpful. I'd suggest at this point, so we don't miss Real Housewives.
Yeah.
That we think about it and we come back with a kind of an intentional and a structured resolve. We've heard from Terry and Jeff, and I do really want to look at the chamber stuff and see how we can fold all that in. And that'll give Scott a chance to kind of look at these things. My hope is that we make these goals things that we can actually, we want to prioritize them because the time is right and we want to get them done. And so a certain amount of specificity for me is important. But we'll discuss that next time. Mike?
Next time. That's what I was going to get to next time. I will not be here in the first meeting in March. These are big deals. I want to be part of this discussion. It should be 5 commissioners present to discuss these. So the second week of March should work as long as Scott can work it out. See, it's not going to happen because of
I don't think I can.
Yeah, see.
I think I'm out of time. We did talk, Commissioner Rodriguez, about potentially having you phone in.
Can I do it? Remember, you were going to tell me, legally, can I do it? I'll be in Hawaii.
You can. We just have to notice where you're going to, and it has to be accessible to the public. I don't think you're going to have a lot of takers. But we do have to notice it. And
we could all go.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So I can, I'll give you the specifics of that. But I think if you're willing, we can make it happen.
Sure. I just don't, this is a big deal, and I have one item on there which happens to be.
Really? You're going to give us like an evening of your vacation?
Well, to me, it's important enough to do it. That'll be the first day I'm in Hawaii, by the way. I actually will get there on the 7th.
I'll agree to it if you wear a lei.
Yeah. Well, let's think about this again. So, Scott, it doesn't have to be, we're going to be doing the community benefits piece, second meeting of March. Now, could this wait? Because we need the time. Could this wait for the first meeting in April?
I think I need to be done by the next meeting. If I can push it to that other one, I can do that. I just need to go talk to the city manager.
Okay, you hear what I'm saying? 'Cause I want to be part of this discussion.
Well, let's figure out how we do I mean, we can't do it tonight. I mean, we're just not in the position to do it. Resolve this.
No, I don't want to.
So we've got to figure out, if we can do it 2 meetings away, Scott will look into that. If we can't, you're going to wear a Hawaiian shirt and a lei and be on the video.
And I'll be praying, okay, if I can participate, and if I can't, I'll be praying that this happens, whatever happens is right. Because, it's going to happen one day.
Just no Mai Tais, okay.
Yeah.
Scott, do you have a clarity on the 5 points that have been made so far?
Six.
Six, sorry.
So we have the historic
Preservation piece.
downtown design district, community benefits, the master plan piece, more.
With the power plant.
Yeah, exactly, with the power plant. We have the housing action item, which is, we're going to try to come up with an incentive program for housing. And then I have, like, in parentheses, ADUs and other housing types, like the bungalow court concept that Commissioner.
I think we can come back next time with more definition. Asia, yeah.
And then, as a suggestion, between now and then, we look at the action items that relate to Planning Commission business that are existing.
And we're prepared to discuss those.
Yeah, and decide, which of those are essential, which of those have been already completed and are irrelevant, and which could be deferred, de-emphasized, or.
And I think we need to take this very seriously. Thank you, Mike, for doing that.
Yeah.
I think this is really important stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the way this commission is trying to conduct our business. So we'll be prepared next time.
Yeah.
And we'll be able to.
And as soon as Scott figures it out, the chair and I will be notified of my ability to participate. I mean, that's important too.
So what I'll have to talk to you about is where I'll get you the information. I was talking.
Can I be at an airport?
Is
that a public place?
It can be in multiple.
Yeah, because I can just stay there because I'm going to literally get there an hour before our meeting.
Oh, okay.
So a public airport in Hawaii. I know, 2 hours. Wait a minute. Up or down? Okay, we'll figure it out. We'll hold it till I can.
Mike, you're worth it. Okay.
Okay, till I call in.
Let's get on to the other items then. I'm going to close this item. Quickly, unfinished business, anybody? Planning Commissioner comments, future agenda items? Hearing none. Community Development Director comments?
I don't have anything else.
Real Housewives?
Bill,
Eric's not liking
for our director, can you just, I know we hit on it a little bit tonight, but I know at the last council meeting, a decision was made not to follow, new rules, Scott, on calling in. Can you just give us a brief? You've already done it for me somewhat, but what are the new?
So no, it just went back to what it used to be. While we were still under our state of emergency, we had the ability so you could Zoom in. And now they didn't continue that. It's going to end at the end of the month anyway because the governor's going to lift the state of emergency as it relates to COVID, basically. And so you still can participate remotely. We can't have a majority of you participating remotely, but we can have you there. We just have to notice where you're at. And then there's other legislation that allows you to do it if there's like an emergency in your family or something like that, and there's a different process for that. But just in general, like you're on vacation but want to participate, we just need to do the notice process for it. So that's 72 hours ahead, I think, or something.
Okay.
Joe?
I hope this is appropriate, but I wonder if at some future meeting, we should consider that because the proposal for the downtown design district is going to take some time, and we still have a 37-foot maximum height on the books as a city ordinance. I know it's going through the process of approval of the Coastal Commission, but perhaps we should think of a recommendation that we somehow put a moratorium on that 37-foot height maximum.
I'm not sure. How would we agendize that, Scott?
I mean, city council took it up when they were making the recommendation and chose not to do it, so.
So it would be redundant.
Not to put.
Correct, yeah, one of the options was to do reconsideration on the ordinance, and they chose not to do that. They talked about it, but they chose not to.
Well, that doesn't mean we can't advise them one way or the other, and that may or may not sway them.
We would need a discussion around that to sort of understand the parameters. I don't know how we would do that. We'd have to agendize it.
Approval was probably the previous.
I think, but didn't they take it up again? No, they haven't done it yet.
They decided on the 14th to do a talk group.
But without a moratorium.
But they didn't, but that wasn't.
Got it.
So this is a future agenda item to bring back for discussion for the Planning Commission, the 37-foot height limitation?
We can make it an agenda item for discussion around that.
I need three of you to nod your head.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Understanding that the city council.
That's what I hear from the commission.
Do it, right?
Yes.
Okay. So, all right, just reiterating.
Am I wrong, that it was not this current city council that chose to do that? It's a different.
The previous, yeah, it was previous city council. I was just saying that city council, the last city council meeting formed the ad hoc committee.
And didn't change it.
Did not ask us to bring it back.
But I don't recall anyone suggesting that they do that. I mean, was it?
It suggested it in the staff report, and they spoke about it at the meeting and chose not to.
Okay, then perhaps it's, I don't know.
I mean, the planning commission can do whatever they want. I'm just letting you know that the city council picked it up, chose not to do it, and anyway, so.
I've got, how many commissioners want to do this?
I think so.
We've got 3.
Okay.
Were you a yes too?
No. But I'll talk about anything.
So I think I want to thank Terry and Jeff. It's always fun to have somebody stay to the end. It makes me feel good. Scott, thank you. Commissioners, thank you. Nate and Anthony, thank you. We don't see any raised hands, do we, on the...
There are none.
Thank you guys very much. We are adjourned.